Commission do. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. We've got a busy agenda, so we'll proceed without any delay. The meeting will, of course, be webcast live to the public. For those not able to watch the footage live, the webcast will be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. That would be an exciting thing to look forward to, wouldn't it? If I can remind members and officers to switch their microphones on when speaking and then turn them off when you finish speaking. I have some substitutes and apologies today. Mrs. Seaton here for Mr. Pearson. Dr. Hill is here for Mr. Bray, and Mr. Brecken has sent his apologies. Right, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of September. I propose that the minutes are taken as read, confirmed, and I sign them. Are you all happy with that? Yep, okay. Question time, item 2, I have no questions. Item 3, no questions under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5 from members. To advise of any items that the Chairman's decided to take as urgent, there are none. Declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Now, there are a number of references to district councils. Therefore, for those of you that are double-hatted members, I'll take a blanket declaration, non-pecuniary, that any issues there that may come up. Are there any other issues that members need to declare? No? Okay. Presentation of petitions. I haven't received any. There are none. Oh, declarations at the party whip. I nearly missed that. Anyone want to be whipped? Or have been, yeah. Right, okay. No petitions, so that takes us to the first substantive item on the agenda today, which is the Leicestershire County Council Strategic Plan. Now, you'll recall that when we had this in July, members right across the Commission did raise a number of concerns about the plan, what it was trying to achieve, how clear it was, whether it was just motherhood and apple pie, I remember was a phrase that came up because it was very difficult to disagree with the 5 objectives that seem to encompass most of what we do. But I understand, and it's clear from the report, that some work has taken place over the summer. I'm sure the officers have been working hard. And you'll also recall that it was suggested that we ask the leader to come. So can I welcome Nick Rushton this afternoon? I believe this fits with your leadership portfolio, and therefore suggesting that you come along and be able to shed a bit of light on why we're putting so much time and effort into this. What do we hope to get out of it? So I'm going to start by asking Tom Pennell to introduce it. Perhaps you can particularly focus on the parts that have been changed and modified. We've also got the consultation, no doubt you're going to refer to that. And then I'll ask Nick to give us an overview of what he thinks we're hoping to achieve with this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And with your agreement, I was going to ask at the end of my introduction just to ask Chris Lewis to add a few words about the transformation link to this plan as well. As you mentioned, the Commission considered the draft of the strategic plan in July, and since then we've carried out a stakeholder engagement exercise, and the plan has been fairly substantially amended, I think it's fair to say, to take account both of the comments that have been made by stakeholders, but also the views expressed by the Commission at your meeting in July. The report updates you on the stakeholder engagement exercise and seeks views on the updated plan, which is attached as Appendix B, before it's considered by Cabinet next week and at the County Council on December the 6th. The background to the plan and the rationale for taking an outcomes-based approach were set out in the previous report to the Commission and are also recapped on the second and third pages of the report. And I don't plan to go over that again, rather to focus on the engagement findings and the changes to the plan. Paragraphs 19 to 28 of the report summarise the findings of the stakeholder engagement exercise, including the views and comments of the Commission, and Appendix A sets out those findings in detail. And I recall that at the previous meeting you wanted to see the engagement information in detail. I won't go through all of the comments that have been made for reasons of time, but some of the key comments that were made were there was broad support for the 5 priority outcomes and acknowledgement from stakeholders that they generally align well with the priorities of their organisations. There was a concern, however, and that was particularly expressed here, but also it was covered in some of the stakeholder responses as well, a general lack of detail about how the plan will be delivered, by whom the plan will be delivered, and what the role of partner agencies will be. More detail on performance management and performance monitoring information was requested. And there was a general view, and I think you referred to this at the start, Mr. Galton, that the plan perhaps had a flavour of motherhood and apple pie. It was too high level and didn't provide enough detail about what would actually happen. It was also felt that a number of key issues were underplayed in the priorities, including, for example, the environment, education, the needs of the most vulnerable, and mental health issues. Those were some of the specific issues that came out. Paragraph 30 in the report sets out how these comments were responded to in making changes to the plan. And as I mentioned, reasonably substantial changes have been made, including to address the concerns that you made. Just looking at paragraph 30 there, we've amended the vision in response to the comments. We've shortened that and included some explanatory text to support that. We've added detail into the Achieving the Vision section to cover partnership working and delivery mechanisms against each theme. We've included a detailed performance framework, which is at the end of the plan, and that will enable us to track the delivery of the outcomes and also benchmark our performance against other councils. And we've incorporated equality and environment into a single principle, and that reflects the importance of those 2 objectives to the council's corporate social responsibility role. Points F to J in paragraph 30 set out how some of the specific comments about the priorities have been addressed in the plan. So I won't go through those, but some of those things I mentioned earlier, like, for example, mental health, have been picked up in those specific ways. Paragraphs 31 to 35 summarise the proposed final priority outcomes and the principles which will underpin how the council will work as an organisation to deliver them. It's perhaps useful to look at page 51 of the page 49 of the papers. There's on that page there is a 1-page summary of the plan, which sets out at the top the 5 high-level priorities. Beneath that, supporting outcomes. So you've got the 5 priority outcomes at the top, then you've got some more detailed supporting outcomes sitting beneath that. And then beneath that, we've set out the key strategies and partnerships that will be responsible for delivering those outcomes. And clearly, some of those are arrangements that involve some of our partners as well as the county council. And then beneath, in a very brief fashion, we've set out the role of commissioning, service planning and transformation to support the delivery of the plan. There is work underway to embed an outcomes-based approach into how the council works. So once approved, the plan and the outcomes will start to shape the commissioning activities of the council. Departmental commissioning strategies and plans will set out how the priority outcomes will be delivered, and I know that some departments are already starting to frame their departmental commissioning strategies in this way, and we're also putting in place corporate governance arrangements which will support the new approach. A key part of the approach will relate to a reframing or a refresh of the council's transformation programme, and at this point I'll hand over to Chris just to say a few words about that.
Thank you. it's fair to say I think the transformation programme in its recent history has heavily been involved in looking for opportunities to pursue savings and to make the organisation more efficient and more effective. What I see personally is that our approach towards outcome-based commissioning or outcome-based approach gives us a new opportunity to really again look at the services provided by the County Council, but also the way in which those services are provided, in order to make the best use or most effective use of all the resources available to the organisation. It's fair to say that the 5 outcomes will be a significant focus for the revised transformation programme as we support medium-term commissioning strategies, as Tom has mentioned, developed within and across the departments. I guess as well as challenging the services provided by the organisation, and this is something that the 5 outcomes will really help us with, I also want to pursue, and we will be pursuing, improvements to the way we do things. And this is around actually making sure the Council, under the vision, remains a sustainable, successful organisation leading modern and highly effective services. And that gives us certainly a vision and a pursuit for us to challenge the way in which we do things and to further make best use of our resources. So this is about alignment of all of our efforts around the new targeted vision. We're already pursuing a lot of activity under becoming more modern and highly effective. We're looking at the use of digital. We're looking at our contract management, performance management arrangements. We're looking at the skills we need to have a resilient workforce of the future, as well as the way in which we approach challenges such as the commercial agenda. So there are a number of factors here that I think come together to make the organisation more modern, highly effective, and most important, sustainable. So we're anticipating reviewing the transformation programme to make sure that we're embracing the significant change that the organisation could potentially take forward under an outcome-based approach, and we intend to define that and start using our transformation board in order to kind of agree, confirm that, and then ultimately deliver it.
Okay, thank you very much for that statement. So, Nick, why are we doing this? What's it going to achieve? Is it worth the time and effort that officers are putting into it? I'll just ask you particularly if you look at the consultations, we sent out a wide list of key partnerships were identified. And yet, if you look on the next page, those that responded, just makes you wonder how seriously some of the organisations took it. So no response from Bladebury District Council, no response from North West, no response from Leicester City, no response from the CCGs. So either they didn't think this was really serious, or for some reason they didn't choose to engage. So I'm a bit concerned about that. But perhaps you can pick that up. Thanks.
Yeah, well, first of all, Simon, thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the significant amount of time you did devote to it in July, and for the comments you made. Partly due to your comments and other comments, as Tom has said, some significant changes have been made to the plan. I'll have to ask Tom in a minute why those significant stakeholders didn't respond, but they, in my view, certainly should have responded, because the strategic plan will set out the vision for the council as an organisation for the people and places for years to come. And as you've already heard, it's already beginning to drive the agenda for various departments. They'll have to make sure they adhere to the plan. The change management team are making sure that is aligned with this. And it's also important that the plan document doesn't simply sit on a shelf. You know, in here there are detailed performance framework so we can measure the progress in delivering it and take action where outcomes aren't being achieved. So I'm surprised that some people who were consulted haven't responded, but at least we did consult them. Tom may well know why they haven't responded, but this document is of great importance to us all, as I said, because it will drive the agenda for years to come. And although we think the 5 objectives are motherhood and apple pie, they are certainly really sound 5 objectives and tightly focused, rather than having like 20. Stick to 5, drive the agenda on 5, and achieve the 5 rather than mentioning 30 and only achieving 5. Let's stick to the 5. But it is a very, very important document for all members of the County Council and certainly for the leadership. Maybe Tom can shed some light on why some of the districts and the city didn't respond.
I mean, I can't give an explanation of why individual partners didn't respond. We clearly feel that we identified a good list of partner organisations to engage with. We have had good responses from a decent number of them, I think it's fair to say. I mean, what I would say is that the responses that we did get back, the respondents were generally happy with the approach that we were taking, generally happy with the 5 priorities, generally thought they aligned well with their own priorities. So I could, perhaps one inference of that might be that the other partners were reasonably happy with the document as well, and as we know, people are more likely to respond to a consultation if they're unhappy about something than if they're happy. But that's me surmising about that.
Okay, thanks for that. Nick, trying to understand then how it's going to be used. You say it's going to be used in the departments. Obviously, the most important document we do is the MTFS every year. Now, do you see that this will be kind of used to say, well, we might have to stop doing this service because it doesn't fit with this plan? So it's really important that members understand how important this is going to be in the future in terms of driving, what we do, what we don't do, what we can't afford to do anymore. Could as a result of this, in due course, things come forward and say, well, we're going to stop doing this now because it doesn't fit with the plan? Because that's the bit, it's hard to see from this high level if that might be a consequence of it. And if that is the case, we do want to understand that.
Well, ultimately, this document will drive the MTFS, and the MTFS and all departments need to be focused their efforts on delivering the strategic plan for the council. So ultimately, I suppose you could be right. If money does get that short, we should stick to the driving the strategic plan forward, not going off to the side and doing other things, or maybe, as you suggest, might have to cease doing other things. I mean, ceasing doing anything is particularly hard, as you know, but the strategic plan is the strategic plan of the council. Departments will be aligned to delivering the strategic plan, so therefore budgets will have to be aligned to deliver the strategic plan. I think that's true to say, isn't it, Tom?
That's right.
I think that's important. We understand that it is going to impact on financial planning and what we can and can't do. Right, shall we open this up for questions? Do you feel this is an improvement on what we saw in the summer? It's clear that a lot of work has gone into it. David?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to support this. I think it's an excellent, improved document. But I'm very, very concerned that consultees haven't commented. I mean, have they said, we don't wish to comment, we support it, or have they just been silent? Because if they've been silent, can we have an assurance they actually receive the consultation? Because at the very least, it's bad manners. And I wonder what they would say if they had consulted us and we had not replied.
I think, Tom, I'd like to assure you that they have, but I obviously wasn't in charge of the paperwork for the consultees, but I trust Tom will be able to tell you that they were consulted.
I mean, I think we'd be fairly confident that all of the targeted consultees did receive the documents. The ones that we didn't get responses from, they were silent, in effect. We didn't get sort of, people responding with a nil response. We could, of course, follow up, what we could do is circulate the plan to the consultees after it's been approved and thank people for their comments and perhaps ask those who didn't respond why they didn't. But whether that would provide us with valuable information or not, difficult to say.
I think it's a bit late, Chairman. If they've been consulted and not replied, we must assume that they're perfectly happy with it. But it is bad manners not to have replied.
I mean, I didn't mention MPs. I mean, it's very positive to see that Nicky Morton did take the time to respond. You probably wouldn't expect, given what they do at national level, every MP. But MPs, writing in more and more, complaining about cuts that are being made and the impact on that. And if they're not aware of this, then I can see the letter going back from the chief exec saying, well, this now fits with, we're not doing it anymore because it fits with this, and you didn't respond.
It's the old expression, Chairman, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So we have written to everybody. MPs are writing in more and more about some of the tough savings we're having to make, and to a certain extent it's their fault because they don't give us enough money. So those sorts of letters will be sent back to MPs that this policy is set out in the strategic plan, adopted hopefully in time by the full council, and it will be a reason to explain to them why we're not doing something, because the whole of the organisation, all departments and the MTFS are focused on delivering the strategic plan, especially with reducing resources and especially when you look at children's social care, increased demand.
Okay, thanks for that. Terry Inan.
Thank you, Chair. I think at the last meeting I was probably one of the strongest critics of the original, and perhaps the explanation why certainly some of my colleagues in health didn't reply is they would have gone, mother had an apple pie, why am I going to bother responding to this? I think they would be more interested in the current iteration. This is such an improvement. We've actually got some measurable outcomes, some things that we'd be intending to do. I was interested in paragraph 28, where some of our respondents have pointed out we've got problems with transport infrastructure as an enabler and homes being in the right place. Certainly that's an issue in my own area. Oh, I've got interesting colours. I don't know why it's doing that. Green and red. Try again. Oh, that's working. Yes, it is a problem. We've got a major employer, Amazon Distribution, has moved into near us, and when they put their adverts out, they say, you must have a car to work here. Now, that is absolutely appalling. It is a site that would have been on the National Forest line if we had ever put the infrastructure in for it. And I have people in my job club who are being sanctioned because they can't get to jobs from some of the places where we have built social housing in North West Leicestershire. So I think I would like to see in that section where we've got some lovely indicators. There was an RAC indicator which was published in 2013 about the percentage of people who have to travel to work by car. That in the average, I think, across the country is about 60%. In North West Leicestershire, it was in one of the top 10 in the country at 80%. So I think I'd like to have some figures like that that are already kind of publicly available or measurable. I don't know whether we could get the number of people who are being sanctioned in Leicestershire for not being able to get to a job due to lack of transport. These are the kind of real outcomes that my electorate are particularly interested to hear.
Well, thank you for your generally positive remarks, Terry. I'm not going to let you sneak the National Forest line into any document anytime soon, but I'll ask Tom to comment on the other transport things.
Certainly, the performance framework that's attached to the plan is something that we can revise and keep under review because obviously new indicators become available and new information becomes available. So we'll certainly look at those that you suggested just then. And I think what I can also say is that we have strengthened the references to transport infrastructure. I think on page 6 of the plan, and also the supporting outcome, the first supporting outcome under homes does now refer to homes in the right places, which was your specific suggestion in July. So we have strengthened those in those areas, and we can look at the indicators moving forward.
All right, Terry. Yeah. Okay, Rosita.
Thank you. Thank you for the plan. And as you referred to the consultation, I would like to know how are we going to, when the plan is completed, how are we distributing it? Because all of our partners need to know what our vision is and how they can adhere to it. So what's the plan once it's completed?
I mean, certainly, what we will be doing is putting it on the council's website. We these days we don't normally plan to print off too many because of the expense, but we will put it on the council's website. We haven't decided absolutely what we're going to do, but I think what we would certainly want to do is to send a copy to all of the partners that we consulted informing them that this has now been agreed, and we'll do some publicity around it as well in terms of press releases and media releases when it goes to Cabinet.
If I may come back, was my worry, because if we stick things on the website, they tend to be lost because people don't actually know what they're looking for or that it is there. But if partners get a copy, then they can in return advertise it on their individual websites. But thank you, Tom.
Obviously, we do more than just dump it on the website. I mean, nowadays we've got Twitter feeds, we've got Facebook feeds, we've got the new digital Leicestershire Matters. There'll be links to it in all of those, because people will need to know, as Simon said, that the council's agenda will be driven by the strategic plan, and certainly we'll need to send it to MPs, especially those that didn't respond.
Yes. Right, who's next? David Bill.
Just an observation, Chairman, if I may. I'll refer to this later, but under great communities, the last, there's a reference there to the cultural and historical heritage and the natural environment being conserved. I think that aim, laudable though it is challenged later on in the report, where we are faced with large developments. You can't have large developments in the countryside and conserve it at the same time.
So you're saying that there's a conflict, inherent conflict
There is.
in the objectives? Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, housing growth is something we've all got to wrestle with. When you look at the numbers that the districts and the county and city have just wrestled with, 180,000 houses between now and 2050, we need to deliver those houses for people that cannot afford to get on the housing ladder at all. We also need to respect we've got smaller households, so we are going to have to deliver the housing, but the aim is still a laudable aim. So where there are green spaces and areas that people value, we need to protect what is there. Because even 180,000 houses isn't exactly concrete over the whole of Leicestershire. You know, there's still vast tracts of the county which are going to remain forever green. But we do need to remember that we must deliver the housing and transport and jobs growth for the people of Leicestershire.
Remind members that we're going to have a session on what you've just referred to, the growth plan, and the in January. We're going to get a date, and we're going to ask you to come to that, Nick. Sorry, I'm preempting what we're going to do, but so members are aware, the commissioners are aware, we're going to have a one-off meeting on this, because someone's got to pull this all together understand the situation across the piece. But you alluded to, I think, a very important issue with the growth plan.
Simon, to ask about that, when you do that, will you ask just me, or will you also invite along members of the MAG? Because obviously it's not just been the county to have come up with it. All districts have been valued contributors along with the city. So to scrutinise me solely on it, although it will be a county document, I'm happy to come along. It's whether or not you want to invite MAG members.
We'd welcome an input into who the key people. We want the key people there that have had an input into this plan, both officers and members. So if you think people, we were going to ask Byron. I see he's come for another item today because he's the county's representative on the MAG, isn't he? But we will come up with a list, and if you'd like to have an input into that, who we need to make sure we get a good cross. We haven't had this discussion with Tom yet, but we are intending to do that.
He knows now.
As commissioners.
Because I think if you have it in late, sorry to digress, but I think if you have it in late January, for instance, my own district council will have voted on it at full council. They're voting at the moment, I think, for it to go out to consultation. I'm looking at other district leaders here. So by the time you get to late January, it could have been approved by all the districts and the city. If Rosemary emails me, I'll ask the chief who's best to invite now to structure it for you, because we want to be helpful, because it is, as you know, a massive document and a massive amount of houses and roads and growth till 2050.
If I could just clarify on that, all of the councils between now and Christmas are being asked to approve a consultation exercise on the strategic growth plan. There will then be 12 weeks consultation, and the intention is that the Scrutiny Commission session will be within that consultation period, so that the views of the Commission can influence the final decision to approve.
Our trusted committee officer has whispered a potential date in my ear of the 7th of February. Now, we haven't consulted on that because obviously we've got to make sure the people we want can make it. But that's what we're looking at. And as I say, we're a session where we're not have anything else on the agenda that can cloud. We can just focus on that one. We do try and look at what else is happening when we plan these. The only thing we can't accommodate is when you have to jump on a train to London or Byron or go and see a minister or something. Right, okay. David, do you want to come back?
I wasn't talking about housing. I wasn't talking about housing, Chairman. I was talking about commercial development. We'll come to that later on in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I've got Sarah Hill next.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up the thing David did, he's made me think of it, actually. Looking at that list on page 55 of cultural, historical, heritage and natural environment targets, if you like, there isn't actually a specific environmental one there, apart from the CO2 emissions. There's a sort of, in very fairly unreadable green, natural heritage metrics. Does that mean they've been developed or we haven't got there yet? And then my other point is on the next page, we've got an awful lot of targets that are actually sod all to do with the county council. They're district council targets. So I know we work closely with the districts, but we're sort of putting ourselves up to being responsible for somebody else's stuff. Thank you, Chair.
Well, this came up in the previous discussion about the extent to which we could influence the one about affordable housing and quality homes. So whilst obviously we're key partners, we're not the decision makers in this. And we did raise that, didn't we, Tom?
Yes, that's right. I mean, just taking the housing one as an example, I mean, we recognise that the County Council isn't the local housing authority, but through our involvement in the planning process, through our land ownership and through our responsibilities for supported housing, for example, we do have a contribution to make to meeting the housing needs of the county, which is why we've included that. I'll perhaps hand over to Donna to respond to the specific question about the metrics.
Just to say the metrics that are in the grey are the ones that we're still trying to develop exactly what we will measure to record the outcomes. There are other, obviously, the wider natural environment type measures there around carbon and waste, but some of the more heritage initiatives we need to look more closely with colleagues about how we actually develop those indicators to tell us what we want to know.
Yeah, because if you take, for example, biodiversity, national planning guidance says there should be a net gain on biodiversity. So even when you have developments, you should be aiming for a net gain. And that's written into the core parts of the MPPF. So that's a measurement we could take into account, I would hope. Sarah, anything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, my thing about environment, specifically countryside, biodiversity and open spaces, which are an important factor in mental health and stuff. And we can't just say, let's, yes, build 60,000 houses, but, 120,000 plus people will need somewhere to go and, chill. Yes, thank you for and just sort of, it's an important part of what makes us what we are. And I don't think we can ignore it, is what I'm saying. And it does serve a positive benefit for mental health and other things like that, which we're all very concerned about.
Point taken?
Yes, point taken. In looking at that natural heritage metrics line that isn't fully developed yet, that we'll take that into account.
Okay. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. A very quick question, really, for Nick on page 49, which was the chart, which I think is excellent. I think Leicestershire County Council has done probably more than most councils in the country to control anything under its that it can do itself, but a lot of these rely on partnership working. So if one takes well-being and etc., it needs the NHS and that to be involved. Do you sense that we are seeing more willingness of other organisations to work in partnership than we have done, or is it still that we are still, trying to drag some of them kicking and screaming into working collegiately? I just wondered how you sense the state of partnership working across different organisations is going.
Well, personally, Terry, I think we do a pretty good job in Leicestershire. Sometimes, as you know, it is difficult. It's difficult dealing with the NHS sometimes because they are so huge. and you get Secretary of State announcing things which could penalise us when we've done deals with district council, with the NHS. We do work well with the district councils. We work well with the city, which is important because it sits in the middle. We work well with Rutland. Wherever we can, I've always tried, since I've been leader, to foster good relationships. We work well with the LEP, fire service and everything. So we do try our best. And I think we are a good example. Just look at the retention of business rates bid, for instance. That's a really good example of it. 7 districts, 1 of them Liberal, 6 Conservative, the County Council Conservative, the City Mayor's involved, the Fire Service involved. These are good examples of partnership working, and while we're all friends, we should continue that, because as I often say when I do things with SPS in the city, 90% of what we do, we're doing for the benefit of the population as a whole. It's only the last 5 or 10% where politics comes into play. So, as I've always said to you, Terry, when I deal with the mayor, what we do is we don't bother with the 5 or 10% where we might fall out, because there's 90% of the stuff we can do in unison, and that goes the same with district colleagues, the health service, doctors, anybody that we can spend the few pounds we've got better for the benefit of the people of Leicestershire.
I think I've done everyone who wants to make a contribution. Anybody got any other comments? Right, so some suggestions have been made, particularly in relation to measuring things, but I think you've accepted that there's a bit more work to do on that. There is a concern about the lack of response from some partners. That's just to note, really. The process is finished, so we can't do anything about that. But generally, there seems to be a recognition that the plan has been significantly improved since we last saw it. It's going to Cabinet next week and then on to Council in December. So are you happy to say that the improvements are sufficient to support this in principle, subject to some further minor alterations? Presumably they'll be made by the time it goes to Council. There'll be a finished product, will there?
In terms of the performance measures, that's probably that element of it's probably going to be a bit of a living document, because we won't be able to tie up all of those before then, but we'll make as many improvements as we can to that aspect.
And Rosita whispered in my ear a while back that this is something that we will no doubt want to monitor, to talk to you about what that appropriate time of year to actually see what we've achieved.
I mean, on that, later on this afternoon, you're going to be seeing the annual performance report, the annual delivery report, and future versions of that will measure progress against the strategic plan. So I would suggest that in the future, when you receive that report, that will cover that aspect of.
Thank you very much. Thank you, table and officers, and Nick coming on this afternoon to help us with
Simon,
this.
I was going to stay, not that it's my portfolio for the next one, because as you know, Pam can't attend because she's gone to the Palace to receive her medal, so I'll stay, and then if Tom will do most of it, but any comments you make I can then report back.
Right, can we change the top table? Right, item 9 then, working together to build great communities, the Leicestershire Community Strategy 17 to 21. Tom, are you going to start us off?
Yes, thank you. Similar to the strategic plan that you've just considered, the Commission has previously seen and commented on the refreshed community strategy, and the strategy has also been subject to engagement and consultation with key stakeholders, including the voluntary and community sector and parish and town councils. And a revised strategy is in front of you today for your comments ahead of its consideration by Cabinet on December the 12th. It's perhaps just worth saying that there is a key relationship between this strategy and the strategic plan which you've just considered. The community strategy will have a particular role in supporting delivery of the great communities priority outcome in the strategic plan, but it's also important, I think, that I emphasise that it will also have a key role in supporting communities and the voluntary sector to secure progress against the other 4 outcomes too. So this isn't just a strategy that supports the Great Communities outcome, it does also support the other 4 outcomes in the strategic plan as well. So in that sense, it's a cross-cutting strategy. The proposed new strategy builds on the successes of the first community strategy that was approved in 2014 and updates it to take account of new circumstances, new funding challenges, but also to take account of the learning from implementing the first strategy. And to help inform that, we've included case studies of good community initiatives which have been underway in the county across the strategy. So you'll see those interspersed throughout the document. Comprehensive engagement has been undertaken with community representatives and groups, and that is summarised in paragraph 11 of the report. And that culminated last week at a very positive and well-attended community summit which was held at County Hall. And the focus of that summit, as well as an update on where we've got to on the community strategy, the focus was on community groups, representatives of community groups talking to other community groups about the excellent work that they've been doing in a number of areas. So it was very much about sharing good practice. Key comments made during the engagement exercise are summarised in paragraphs 14 to 19. There was general support for the strategy, but in particular there were calls for more prominent and explicit reference to be made to the role of parish and town councils, more emphasis to be placed on the council's corporate social responsibility role, and for a greater link to be made across to the council's emerging new strategic plan that you've just considered, and indeed that was one of the comments that the Scrutiny Commission itself focused on. The plan has been updated to address these comments and the comments that you made in March, and some of the comments will also be addressed in the development of a community strategy action plan which will support delivery of the strategy, and that piece of work is underway and will be overseen by a corporate communities board which is in place within the council. The proposed final strategy is appended to the report, and you can see that from page 83 onwards of the papers. I'm just going to emphasise 3 things within that before I finish. The community strategy priorities, there are 4 priorities, are shown on page 3, so that's on page 85 of the papers. Since the previous version you saw, that's been amended in relation to priority 3 to make specific reference to parish and town councils, which was one of the things that came out in the consultation. On page 14 of the strategy, which is page 96 of the papers, what we've done there is explained the link between the community strategy and the strategic plan and the 5 priority outcomes. So we've provided some examples there of how the community strategy will support delivery of all of the outcomes in the strategic plan, and that addresses a specific concern that this Commission raised in March. And similarly, in response to comments by the Commission, we've provided more detail in relation to each of the outcomes in terms of explaining what the outcome of each priority will be and how it will be achieved. So if you look on pages 16 to 19 of the strategy, pages 98 to 101 of the papers, those 4 pages devote a page each to each priority, and it sets out what the outcome of that priority be, how will we achieve it, and then a case study exemplifying that provided too. So that's our attempt, if you like, to respond to yours and others' calls for a bit more detail about what each priority will achieve.
Okay, thanks very much. That's helpful. Just on the parish councils, I think that is important that we take them with us on this. I've got 29 parish councils and meetings. I probably have more than a number of the members. Some of them just see this as, well, the county trying to shuffle, and districts trying to shuffle things onto them to do that we can't afford to do anymore, or that we'd prefer them to take over and do. That's not to say they're not all unwilling to do it. Some are willing, but the key thing that kept coming back was that they do need help and support to get to that. So if you just take what we did a couple of years ago, when we asked them, as many that wanted to take grass cutting, they felt that we just gave them a map and told them to get on with it and sign a service level agreement. And what they actually needed was some technical and professional help. You know, some of them were quite big parishes, quite a lot of grass needing to be cut, and they needed to go through a procurement exercise and let a contract, and there was no help with that. So I think if we are going to want them, and I've seen this in the highways, the suggestion that we give them more things to do. We can't just say, well, you take this over and we'll give you a little bit of money and then you get on with it. We've actually got to provide a small resource that can go out and help them do it and be there on the end of the phone when they've got an issue. Because you can't expect a parish clerk to hold all that information. And I say the same thing to districts, but the districts are trying to get them to do all community centres and buildings, and when there's a new development, the district palms it off on the parish. And they could be a £1 million contract to put up a new building. They're just not equipped for that, so they need help and expertise if we're going to do it. That would be my observation.
Well, I'm a bit like you, Simon. I serve on 7 or 8. I go to 7 or 8 to actually serve on one, Ashby de la Zouch Town Council. And as you rightly point out, some are more than capable. So, for instance, Ashby's a big town council with proper offices and stuff. They can take stuff on if they want to, because there's no compulsion. You're right, they do need help. There is some help in Tom's team to help them through it, but there's not limitless amounts of help for them. But I'm certainly very keen on being friends with parish councils, because they are, in my view, very, very local people. I mean, some of them aren't elected, which is a bit of a pain, but they could just co-opt each other on. But they do work hard, and it is good if they do take over things. But as you rightly say, they do need some help, especially some of the little. I've got some very tiny ones, and I've got some big ones. So I agree with you entirely, and Tom assures me we do have some help, but he's going to explain to you that it's not a bottomless pit of help now.
I mean, that's right. It isn't a bottomless pit of help, but we do within the document commit to supporting community groups and to supporting parish and town councils. So we are including that provision within the strategy. I mean, I think what I would say is that. In engaging with the parish and town councils and others on this community strategy, there's been a very different tone to that engagement compared with what it was 3 or 4 years ago. Because I think 3 or 4 years ago, parish and town councils were very much saying, this is, they were reacting, if you like, to a perception that the county council was pushing activity down onto them, and this was something that they would have to deal with. I think now there's a much greater acceptance that this is a collaboration between the county council and the parishes about supporting communities in their local areas, and I think that's probably been supported by the experience of the community managed libraries, where where I think there was an initial reaction to that, but we found a way in virtually all areas of finding a good outcome from the council working together with the local communities. I think the other thing that came through at last week's community summit is the willingness, certainly of some communities, to support others and to share their good practice and to support others to follow their positive initiatives and roll those out across a wider area. One of the other things that was emphasised at that community summit, though, was the importance of information, advice, and guidance being made available to parish and town councils, so that there's so they've got that support to help them deliver services in the future.
We've also got some areas, Tom, sorry, just called you Tom there, Simon, some areas of the county which don't have a town or parish council. I think Dr. Einem will not have a town council, so in those sort of areas you really need to support the voluntary and the community organisations, because she's certainly got those, but she hasn't got a town council.
Absolutely, point taken. Right, I've got Sarah Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Nick has just mentioned what I was going to say, and it does annoy me here on page 87 where it says, whilst we understand the entire county is not parished. No, we don't understand it. We know it isn't parished. Market Harbour's not parished. Loughborough's not parished. Colville's not parished. Hinkley's not parished. So, they're quite substantial places, and I don't get a big feeling from this that the community groups in those towns are going to be helped as much as the town and parishes. I'm not knocking the town and parishes. I'd be quite happy for Market Harbour to be parish, but there we go. But Nick's right, there's a balance there. A trivial question. Do the case studies relate to the issue on the page? Because the one on 101 doesn't. And finally, I mean, I think there is an issue around helping groups do stuff when the county council's involved. I get involved a lot in closing the roads in Market Harbour, and the county council isn't helpful in that. And if it wasn't people like me who'd done it for a long time and knew what was going on, community groups who then take it over, like we did on Remembrance Sunday, would flounder. And people manage, but again, and that's just because those involved in the county council are so overworked, they're chasing the tails and can't help. But when we start to veer into things that are delivered by sort of commercial companies that got people to do it, community groups do struggle. Simon's right. Unless you happen to have somebody with the right skills, people will sink or not bother because they just go, I can't cope, and it costs a lot of money. So there's a balance to be struck here, and in some cases, I'm not sure we'll always get there. Thank you, Chair.
On the question of parishes, personally, I'd like to see all areas parish, but it's not in my gift to parish them. But I think it would be good if the bigger towns, I mean, certainly Colville, I've got experience of, did have a parish council, but it hasn't got one. And on the road closures, as far as I'm aware, Ian Veers down in Highways and Transportation has worked tirelessly over the past few weeks to help people out with the road closures, and the fact that the police weren't policing the road closures. So in Ashby, the service I went to, they had some retired firemen who had parked Land Rovers across the street, and they were manning, well, not just stopping the traffic coming down the street, they were just trying to get there, but that was done with volunteers. And I personally think Ian Veers and H&T have done an incredibly good job, because it's in addition, as you know, to their day job.
Okay, Terry Einan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the leader for his warm comments about town councils, and yes, he would absolutely have my support, because I think this strategy here is very pertinent to an area like Colville, which has a lot of very active community groups. One of the things I'm very pleased to see is an asset-based approach. That's always been something I've supported. I do think we mustn't, though, throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is the risk of the inverse care law, and I think we saw that with the libraries, where, though it was virtually all wonderful, Barwell, which is probably one of the most needy communities, as I understand it, didn't manage to get anyone together to save their library for the community, and I do think libraries are vital for disseminating information. And this comes back to this point everyone else has brought up about supporting community groups. Being involved in several community groups, one of the things that they all tell me is, when I say to them, where are you going to get your support from? They go, well, we asked Val, but nothing happened. Val are very good at putting on events, very good at producing glossy brochures, but when it comes to getting someone that I can pin down to help someone, a community group I'm supporting, to fill in a bid or to understand accounting, completely useless. So I know that I think we've just given them the contract again or something. I'm not sure that that this strategy can work without that really gritty grassroots stuff on, if you're setting up a social interest company, understanding the responsibilities of being a company secretary, for example. It's basic stuff, and people need something that is a little bit more close to the communities if people are going to do that. And maybe this is something we could push through the town and parish councils. Maybe that would be a mechanism for doing that. So thank you.
Whose gift is it in to set one up? Is it the borough?
I'm not too sure. I don't want to lead you down the garden path in it, but I think I'm not sure. Tom may know. On Barwell, we did try, as you know, incredibly hard. I think the best thing to say about Barwell, there was some unusual circumstances down there that were brought in play. It was a shame. I mean, I did visit it 2 or 3 times, but as you say, it's the only one so far, but it was a shame. Tom might be able to help you out about how you get a parish council, because I certainly can't.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's the district council that takes the lead in relation to that through, I think it's community governance review. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I remember. Right, David Bill.
On the question of Barwell, Chairman, I think if we could have a renewed effort to try to revive the library there, that would be in everybody's interest. It's it's madness that a centre that was set up
Too big. In the wrong
was
place.
set up for that purpose to provide services to the community cannot put together a library service now. So if that could be pursued, I think that would be a benefit to everybody. We've picked up quite a few items this afternoon about the unparished areas, and I think it might be through you, Chairman. I don't know whether Rosemary could put together a memo on this of some kind, because we do face problems. Those of us who are trying to promote community development in unparished areas. Last night I went to a residents' meeting, and the residents there had offered to set daffodils in the highway. Now this is something which we've been trying to encourage through the Environment and Transportation Subcommittee Scrutiny role. We've been trying to encourage residents to take responsibility for the highways in front of their houses in order to reduce costs to everybody and to enhance the appearance of the roads. They said that they came to County Hall with this suggestion that they should take this over, and were told that they had to first of all get a cultivation licence. So I'm not sure what a cultivation licence is, but that's sort of held up this process. So there are various issues that could do with addressing if we're going to encourage community development.
It's about removing barriers, isn't it, and making it easier, and it probably needs some further work, because the majority of what parish councils, town councils do relates to the Environment and Transport Department. Although, they do engage with your department, most of the contact they have is with that department. And perhaps, they'll say, well, we haven't got the resources, but the challenge is how do we provide a small amount of support to help them through these sorts of things? Because sometimes we just seem to put up barriers. Sometimes it's necessary because it's legal and it's got to be done. You can't have people just going around putting things on the highway. But it's getting that balance right. Yes, daffodils. Okay, I've now got Rosita.
Yes, and on that point, there's something I am not quite clear about, because the way I see it, this is a strategic document that sets out aspirations and not a mechanism to deliver. So correct me, if I'm wrong here, and tell me what exactly we're trying to achieve. Because Tom said earlier on, yes, we're trying to commit ourselves to help, but that's then in a general term. So we are then now delving into all of these details, and we are looking at details and reciting items of daffodil planting and whatever, which it's very, very difficult when you do not have a policy or a mechanism how to actually, or any of this is being delivered. So I could come tomorrow and say, okay, Tom, you said, you're going to help me. I want to deliver a leisure centre. I need a project manager that costs £30,000, but we haven't got those resources. So I think behind the aspirations, there have got to be some policies that deal with it. And I wonder if you can clarify how we're going to pick this up, not to raise expectations too high. And my other point is in relation to Terry Einen's point when she just mentioned Val. I think that has been mentioned so many times. We do have a service level agreement, and some of these issues which are into our aspirations need to be fed into that. And I've mentioned that many, many times before, because we are just the arm, and we should ensure that the people we pay deliver what we ask them to. So,
yes, no, thank you. You're right, Mrs. Page. This is a strategy document, so it doesn't include all of the detailed actions that will be delivered to support it, and that action plan is in preparation at the moment. What I would say is that what we've tried to do under each of the priorities, so if taking priority 1 on page 98, is to set out how we will achieve this. So there's some bullet points there which set out the sorts of activity that will be delivered, and then through the action plan we will specify in more detail what will actually be done. And what I probably want to emphasise at this point is that that action plan isn't just an action plan for the communities team, it's an action plan for the council. So departments will be responsible for some actions in relation to this. So for example, the community managed library type initiative, that's something that was led by the Adults and Communities Department with the support of the communities team and others. And in the new action plan, there will be actions led by departments as well as actions led by the communities team. So there's an absolute commitment from us to turn this strategy into actions and reality on the ground. But of course, we do have to bear in mind that there aren't limitless resources to support this, and we will have to prioritise.
Could I come back? So mechanisms, are they also included in that? Because, as I say, it would help if, we know of the mechanisms to follow in order to, achieve these partnership workings. And my other question was, do we actually feed any of these into our service level agreements, going back onto Terry's point as well?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by mechanisms. Do you want to perhaps explain that point?
Yes. Well, as I say, if I am a parish council and I come to you and I will ask you, could you provide me with a project manager or whatever? Obviously you're going to say no, but there is a process to take. And, so do we have those in place so that we ensure that everything follows a certain process?
Certainly in terms of delivering the community strategy, there's a communities team in my area in the Chief Executive Department which leads this work. It can't deliver all of it, but it coordinates delivery of this strategy. So that's the first point of call. Clearly, if it's a transport initiative, then it would be sensible to talk to the Environment and Transport Department about that, but to involve the communities team as well if there's a community aspect. So I think that would be my suggestion around that. In relation to our support for voluntary and community sector organisations, Priority 3 covers how we will support VCS organisations and social enterprise and parish and town councils. That includes having funding some of those organisations, and we have service level agreements to do that. And it's our responsibility to make sure that those service level agreements are honoured, and that, for example, where an organisation like Val has been appointed and has successfully won the contract to deliver that they do deliver what they're expected to deliver through that contract. I think that's the point that you were asking about there. So we are committed to supporting those organisations with more limited resources than we had in the past, but it's increasingly important that we manage those contracts effectively so that we get the support from them that we're buying.
Okay, I've got Brenda next.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I agree, I feel as though I'm going to take you back a little bit. I agree that we should not allow people to put things on the highway willy-nilly. I'm not sure who suggested that. But we do have to put things in the context of supporting the parishes, how we've just said. 3 weeks ago, well, I've only got 3 parishes in my area, 2 very, very small ones and 1 larger one. And 3 weeks ago, we were informed that we had to supply a structural engineer's report on whether the terraced housing can support Christmas trees this year. Now, for us to do that, it is quite difficult, and we're a larger parish council in Thurmaston, but for Barkby and Beeby to suddenly do that, I mean, the timing there would not have been supportive for a parish council to be able to deliver something like that. So thought always has to be given to help those parish councils out, whether it's time constraints or being able to, because we sat there and thought, well, do we need a structural engineer? Where is a structural engineer? So with those demands from the county council also need to come a little bit of help there as well for them. Thank you.
I agree with you entirely. It's a resource issue in the end because they're all trying to do their day job, deliver the service. Right. Terry Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on a similar theme because we clearly all love parish and town councils. Just a bit of expansion on Tom, if I may, because I've looked into this recently in another life. If anyone wants a parish or town council, if you read the Bible for parish and town councils, it gives you the figures that you need in a petition for the local council then to consider a corporate governance review to set one up, and it's fairly straightforward and easy to do. But that wasn't my point. Mine was really on the theme that's just been mentioned about I think support for parish and town councils can be quite simple from here as a facilitator. So it's those points that a simple, if you're getting lots of councils coming asking the same question, then to have a question and answer or, obvious questions on a website that could just be put on. So one of the key ones, for instance, to give you a concrete example, is that most parish and town councils wouldn't realise if they were looking to take on mowing the verges, you can use red diesel for doing that. However, if they maintain their own parks, you can't use red diesel, you can only use white diesel, and therefore they couldn't take on doing the verges using red diesel, because otherwise they'd break the law by having contaminated tanks. So it's an obvious example where we probably have the legal expertise here to explain that to parish councils at no cost to ourselves, which I think would be extremely useful. I echo the bit about sometimes our internal processes. So, my own parish councils in my division get the usual thing of, every year they put hanging baskets and Christmas lights on their lamppost. Then they get told they need to pay for a survey of the lamppost to see if it can take the weight. Now, the county council have bought the lamppost. They know what it can support. And why is it that they can only have an annual licence? If they got a 5-year licence, the work it would save here in county would be astronomical by just giving a 5-year licence rather than saying you've got to come in every year. So I think it's that working collegiately together for information where we have a legal resource perhaps to check the veracity and HMRC regulations, and whether we can work more simply through in terms of our process of giving permission, I think sets a really nice trend. And one thing I would say, one thing that the County Council does brilliantly, it does have superb project management expertise, which is available to actually be paid for and used by district and parish and town council. So to say there is no, the council wouldn't provide it, it might have to be paid for, but there is an expertise bank here, which I think perhaps is not a lot of people aren't aware of. So can we stop hiding our light under a bushel and let people know what they might be able to have, even if there is a cost of having it?
It don't come cheap.
Yes.
It's good, but it doesn't come cheap.
I'll tell you what, compared to anyone else, it is incredibly cheap, but that's a by the by.
Okay, that's a positive. I don't think you need a response on that. I think you've told us.
Well, only about the street lights.
As you know, Terry, I serve on a parish council, a town council, albeit a big one, but I do attend my small parishes, and it is an issue, as Brenda said, but I don't really know what you can do, because obviously if they did put something up on the building and it did fall on someone's head, someone's going to get sued, so they're possibly being over careful. Maybe there may be an argument, like you say, for a 5-year licence or something, but I can only take it back to Blake, who does this. I mean, I used to do this. I used to get these complaints all the time, but I can have a word with Blake and see if there is some latitude, because in my view, we want to be super friendly with parish and town councils because we all attend them and we know how hard those people work for no money whatsoever.
I think we're all singing from the same sheet here, that if we're going to produce a document which is encourage them to do more, we've got to make it as easy as possible without cutting any corners, obviously, but look to simplify process and have clear steps. Because a lot of them, they say, oh yeah, well, we'll do that. Then they find out all the hoops they've got to jump through. They're like having liability insurance to do things. And all this sort of thing, and they didn't understand that at the beginning. I think we're all really sorry, David. I've got you next.
Well, Chairman, as parish councils have been mentioned, I'm a great supporter of parish councils, and this is my 48th year as a member of Countersthorpe, and I've twice been appointed by Blaby District Council very kindly as a member of Kilby. So I do speak with some authority. And in Blaby, apart from Wigston Parva, which is too small to have a parish council,
Every parish has got a parish council, but I do feel sympathy with places that haven't. Now, I can recall the Market Harborough Council being formed by amalgamating 4 other councils, but they lack a town council. They no longer have one. And this applies to many others. We've heard about Colville and Ashby and places such as that. I do think there is a need, and I do think we can help. It may not be our responsibility, but if in our website or we had a named officer as a parish council officer that people could approach, I mean, we could only be in an advisory capacity because it's not in our remit. But I do support the idea of every town having a parish council or whatever, or a town council. The work that they do, and as Nick has said, no one gets paid for doing it, and some of them put a lot of hours into it. And I think we're missing something, or they're missing something, we're not having them. So if we could have some kind of support, advisory, whatever, just perhaps on the website so they knew who to contact. Because in my time, I remember Kilby being set up, and more recently Shearsby, which is in Blake's division, have gained a parish council from a parish meeting. So let's help them if we can. Thank you.
Tom.
Yes, in relation to that specific point, we've been having a number of events with parish and town councils, which we've been calling the big discussion events, and we've had lots of feedback from them on how the relationship between the county council and parish and town councils can be improved. And one of the things we're looking at as part of the contact centre review is establishing an easier route for parish and town councils into the council that doesn't mean that they have to use the contact centre alongside everybody else. So that's not, we haven't got the precise solution to that yet, but it's looking at the precise issue that Mr. Jennings just raised. And if I could just quickly make one comment in response to Mr. Richardson's comment about project management expertise. There is a link, I think, here with the corporate volunteering programme where the expertise of county council staff, can be made available to support voluntary activity, and that's project management expertise is something that could be brought to bear to support community initiatives through that process.
Yeah, just to comment on that route, you look at the moment, that route when things go wrong or when they feel they've not had a satisfactory response is the local member, because that's where they go. And we all get emails from here, please find enclosed a copy of response from blah blah officer. We are not happy with this. Can you take it up for us? So if we could resolve that at a corporate level. Okay. Sorry, somebody wanted to come back. Brenda.
I feel as though we've been negative about parishes and their involvement and their help from county council. So I want to end on probably something positive. Going back to the library, Thurmaston is the only one in the county council that built their own purpose-built library with enormous help from the county council with the local community group. So I couldn't fault that sort of help that was be given at all. It was excellent.
Okay, that's a positive thing. Terry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just forgot to ask one question. Page 95. When I attended the workshop on this document, and unfortunately I had to leave early to attend the LEP board, we were discussing this case study, and I didn't understand the case study then. I don't now, and I just wonder what has actually been achieved out of this group, because one of the things we were talking about as I left was that we were going to have some concrete examples around this case study.
Thank you. Yes, we are still in the process of following those up. What we'd really like to do is, following the Community Summit event last week, is use some of the case studies that were promoted at that event, so that we've got some real life. This was a case study of something that we've been working on collaboratively here at the council, but what we really want to do is to use community-led initiatives to demonstrate what we're actually trying to achieve through the strategy. So we will, where possible, we will replace these case studies with the actual community-led initiatives that have been promoted through community members at the summit.
Right, so time is pressing. We've got a lot of items on the agenda still to do. Is anyone... bursting question. Go on, Terry.
Chair, while people are saying positive things, I did want to comment on the very good level of help that the community group Hermitage FM have had from the communities team, and I would, I'd like to applaud that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so to summarise then, we're generally think this is a positive report, positive strategy, something that we want to get behind and support. Is this going to Cabinet? Are you going to endorse this?
Yes, it's going to Cabinet in December.
Right, okay. And we want to support that, but we feel that there is a bit more work to do, that if we want town and parish councils more involved, then there's got to be an adequate mechanism to help them take things on. If we can feed that back, that would be great. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for coming. Right. I think we're moving next to item 10, which is the annual delivery report and performance compendium. No.
No.
Change at the top table. We've got Andy Brown joining us. I think you're starting off with a bit of a presentation, is that right? Right. If I could remind you that we've had 2 hours of PowerPoint this morning, you get the message.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I just do a quick introduction and then pull out some key data from the PowerPoint very quickly. I think members will be familiar with receiving an annual report that goes to the Cabinet, to Scrutiny and to full Council each year. We've enhanced the document this year in response to comments from last year, which I'll cover that in a moment. Just a reminder why it's important you have this document. Under the new sector-led approach to performance of local government, it's very much the responsibility of the Council, Cabinet and Scrutiny now to have a full understanding of performance. We don't have the Audit Commission, we don't have bodies looking at performance corporately, though we do have various inspectorates and submissions we have to make, so it's really important that we understand our performance, what the issues are, and how we can tackle that moving forwards. And we do that by annually producing this report for you with all the key statistics in there, which hopefully shines a light on areas that are going well and areas we need to improve on. And as I say, we have enhanced that this year with some extra benchmarking information. So the document is in 2 parts. The first part is the narrative statement, which really is intended to cover what the Council is delivering each year, particularly against the strategic plan and other priorities. And the second part is the detailed performance compendium, which is really around the data, comparative performance against other authorities, benchmark information, and the actual detailed statistics, which is available to sort of drill into, to dive into the detail around that. We have enhanced that performance compendium this year in response to comments last year, particularly to look at the fair funding campaign. So the document is set much more in the context of the Council's relative funding position. And we've also included more around the future funding pressures, some of the risks that's creating, and the budget situation moving forwards. And I'll pick out 1 or 2 points related to that in a moment. So I'm hoping that enhanced compendium does respond to some of the comments last year. In terms of the narrative section, I wasn't going to go through that in any detail. There are some really good examples in there of delivery, both in terms of transforming services, digital delivery, use of resources to focus on the outcomes and deliver those, and also sort of good plans moving forwards. I think the question was posed last year after significant cuts we've had, how is that being achieved? How can that be the case? And I think when you do analyse that through sort of success in achieving grants through the LEP in terms of transformation, the Better Care Fund, through a lot of use of capital. I think a lot of the projects in there are capital related, a lot of transformation initiatives and Invest to Save. So I think having that firm basis has led to a number of these initiatives. I think if it was just revenue budget driven, it would look lighter than it certainly is. So I think there is a factor in there related to delivery. In relation to the performance compendium, if I just quickly go through 1 or 2 slides, just pulling out the main points. Just in terms of the headline position on the County Council performance, we noted last year that there had been a reduction in performance as the savings requirements had worked through, and as we'd had to reduce some of our service standards. We did move down from being in the top 3 for a number of years to 9th in the comparative county performance table, and we were concerned about where we would move to when all the data came in last year and how we could retain a better position. In the end, when all the data came in, we were around the same position. It actually moved up to 8th. Through a really focused effort in a number of areas to try and maintain performance levels and improving performance levels through the sort of initiatives set out in the report. So sort of good news overall in terms of maintaining that position. So that's the relative position. A number of the councils that are ahead of Leicestershire are the more better funded authorities, so areas like Surrey, who if you look in the funding document do receive significantly more resourcing. So in that terms of the slide, those authorities up in the top left, sorry. The authorities in the top left quadrant are the better funded authorities, but with higher performance. Leicestershire is performing relatively well, but on a lower funding. So those authorities in the top left, I say, are funding their performance through high levels of funding. Those in the top right, the more efficient areas. Sorry. Sorry. So the areas you want to be, the authorities in the top left corner are higher performing but at higher costs, so that's kind of higher budgets and expenditure. The areas in the top right are high performing, lower cost, so that the right hand side is the low funding, and that's sort of the higher you are on the left is the bottom ones are the on the right is the lower funded and lower performing. So the area you don't want to be is in the bottom left, which is the high cost, lower performing. Yeah. So this is based on the 2015-16 benchmark positions.
Oh, well
done. In terms of, just bear with me, the technology's frozen. In terms of some of the messages coming through in the new section of the report, we've included a lot of information around the Fair Funding campaign and how that funding situation looks relative, Leicester's position relative to other areas. So I won't go through the detail in that. I think members will have seen some of that information before. It is available on the council website as well as in the separate documents. So we are seeing that funding reductions have impacted on a variety of service areas, and there are further cuts to come moving forwards. As you're aware, the MTFS has savings of £66 million to come, £23 million not identified, and there is rising demand in a number of areas, and the gap could be £40 million to be saved on top of the £204 million already planned to be saved. There is a refreshed transformation programme and savings requirements set out in the document on pages 11 and 12, and clearly some concern about how they may impact on our performance moving forwards. We have included some analysis this year from a document from SIPFA and the Institute for Government for those members that may be interested, which looks in more detail at local authority and national performance in some service areas, particularly looking at adult social care. So that's included in more detail in the report, as well as information around the Care Quality Commission assessment of adult social care. And again, there is a separate document available on that if members are interested in some of the details. There has been a reduction in the numbers receiving care and the squeezing of fees on care providers, and also there are service quality issues being flagged nationally, with 30% of service providers of low quality, whereas locally 22% require improvement. So that's been added to the report this year. In relation to children's social care, we have seen increasing demands and pressures this year. You will have seen the Ofsted report that goes into this in a lot more detail, which has flagged up some areas for improvement, and there is an action plan that's in place seeking to secure that improvement. And there were some services identified as being under-resourced in that inspection and action plan, which has been responded to. So there are a number of extra areas flagged this year, which are key for the council to note. In terms of staff wellbeing, that's been an issue as well that's flagged in terms of sickness absence and the support that's going on to reduce that overall position. And so we've included more details around that in the report, as well as the risks that are now present in the council. So there's been acceleration in risks that are being managed, linked to savings reductions and strong standards of service delivery. So just to briefly go through one or two of the detailed slides. Highways and transportation has been performing reasonably well comparatively, so I won't go through the detail on that particular area. Adult social care, this has been an area where the council has been low performing compared with other areas comparatively, based on a number of surveys with service users and carers. So that has been an area there's been some focused work by the department to understand that and to try and seek some improvement. Some good news this year that there has been some improvement coming through in some of those survey results. So I've included on this slide some of the increases that have happened this year. So there is some positive news through focused work that there has been an increase in satisfaction. So some of those fourth quartile indicators have gone up to second and third quartile. So some positive news, but still an area that is an improvement priority. Public health, you will be getting a full report on public health performance with all the metrics coming through to the council in December. So I won't go through the detail here. We're generally better than average in performance, and a number of public health indicators are positive, but there are some trends of concern in a number of other areas, particularly around sort of child obesity, adult obesity, air quality, that are addressed in that report. So again, I won't go through the detail here today. Children's social care, this summarises the overall position from 2015-16 in relation to a variety of indicators that Ofsted look at and are critical for the service. It is better than average, so the quantitative side of children's social care is reasonably strong, and there have been some improvements this year through extra resources going into the department through work associated with the Ofsted Action Plan. So some good news in there, but a real set of issues around delivering the Ofsted Action Plan and the importance of that, particularly on qualitative areas that don't get picked up in the metrics. So this slide just highlights some of the improvement areas that have happened in children's social care. So there has been some improvement in 2 or 3 of those metrics, so say through a really focused effort. Waste, I won't go through the detail on waste. Leicestershire has traditionally been a high performer in waste management through a combination of county council and district council joint working. There has been some reductions in that area. We're still above average, but not as good as we were. And clearly some of the savings requirements have been impacting on that area. This is the indication of the quartile positions at the end of this year. So there has been a slight improvement overall, again through this very focused effort this year, but a lot of extra work's gone into that through a variety of funding streams. Just to say something briefly about schools and crime performance, which are flagged up in the report as areas of continued focus. This presents a picture of Leicestershire schools and academies results this year. So just to briefly explain the slide, that those green bars on the right are the schools that perform above the national average on pupil progress, which is the main metric now for judging school performance. Those on the left-hand side in the red are those that are underperforming on the national average. Overall, Leicestershire is about at the national average. I think we're just slightly below on progress. It's quite an interesting area to look at the details, a lot of new metrics and a lot of new ways of looking at the data, a lot of change in the school system. I think out of the schools on the right-hand side of the chart, the ones overperforming, out of those 13, I think 6 of the new schools, the new 11 to 14 schools that have extended their age range. So it looks like they're contributing in a positive way in the new education system. 3 of the ones in the middle are also the new high schools. So 10 out of the 20 are the high schools that have extended, with some of the more traditional schools in the red area. A lot more information will be coming forward on school performance to the Children's and Family Scrutiny Committee, looking at all aspects of education performance, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2. Boys are doing worse than girls. Some areas are underperforming in certain subjects. So it is a key issue for the Local Education Improvement Partnership to drive some of that moving forwards. A lot of this data is going straight to school leaders, so we've got a really good set of analysis that is available to have those conversations and look to seek improvement where needed. This provides a little bit more detail, which I won't go through all the information today. It just shows that actually in maths, where there has been a focus through the LEAP, there has been some improvements. We're actually doing better than the national average now at maths. English, we're about at the national average, though girls do better, not boys. Boys are doing better at maths than national. The EBAC subjects, which are slightly behind the national, but the open element, which is the more non-academic subjects, the more vocational subjects, we're not doing as well as national. So there are quite a few issues in there that are being looked at and need to sort of progress moving forwards. Just a quick headline figure on crime. You may have seen in the press that's been fairly widely reported about the increasing police recorded crime in Leicestershire. So there has been a spike in the last year. There's also been some concerns about police crime recording and whether they've been capturing all the information, which adds to that concern. There are different figures around crime. There is the National Crime Survey, which is an alternative way of looking at it, which has traditionally over the recent years been showing a reduction in crime. So that there hasn't been a spike in data in that area yet. So it is the police recorded crime. And some of that increases in priority areas for Leicestershire, so areas we're not been performing well as worsened. So just to flag that, and I know that's an area you oversee with the police and crime panel. So that's recommended in the report moving forwards for the Cabinet to have a focus on that. So just a quick heads up in terms of delivering our standards and targets over the last 3 or 4 years, we have had some reasonable success in focusing improvement and delivering on a number of areas, but not all areas. So strong on the economic indicators with a strong economic background, so that's been good. Less so on the school performance areas, though we did set some very high standards and expectations on schools, so we haven't managed to achieve those as yet. And around sort of 50 to 60% improvement on some of the other areas, but except in these areas that are priorities for the council that we did want to move. So some improvement, but not all positive. So just in terms of the conclusion and the areas we're flagging to the Cabinet, clearly the Fair Funding campaign and seeking more sustainable funding is absolutely crucial moving forwards, given those risks and issues we have around performance. Implementing the new outcomes framework, which incorporates the new performance framework, will be the focus, and the medium-term financial strategy transformation and commissioning plans. Stronger commercial focus and more digital delivery is being prioritised and needs to come through. We will be enhancing our business intelligence, performance and contract management arrangements to pick up more of these qualitative issues, and they will be coming into the new performance frameworks that come to the scrutiny committees, and we very much welcome your input to those as those drafts come forward to make sure you're getting the information you need to sort of help with monitoring both quantitative and qualitative issues. And then enhanced partnership working with the PCC around crime reduction, the issue of educational attainment, moving forward the Children's Social Care Improvement Plan, and an enhanced focus on workforce health and wellbeing. So that's all I wanted to say in introduction. I'm sorry it was a very quick whiz through a lot of complicated data and there is a lot of information in here, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
So one of the things we do here is that we can't obviously go into incredible detail on a particular, but we have in the past identified areas where we've got concern about that we would like a more in-depth report, either to us or the relevant scrutiny committee. So if there are any things you see in here that you are worried about or feel doesn't fully address or cover the issue, particularly I suppose the focus would be on the fourth quartile indicators. If you want to flag any up for further work, that's absolutely fine. The first part of the report, which you didn't really say much about, really, I think I made this comment last year, it's really looking forward rather than back. A lot of it's looking at things that are in development or going to be hitting us over the coming year. Just remind us of what the thinking is about having this whole narrative and this section about all the services that we're providing, and a lot of it, as I say, is if you take the stuff around the strategic economic plan, and the strategic growth plan. And the strategic growth plan hasn't even been agreed for consultation yet, and yet we're putting in here it as a major part of our delivery. What is the thinking about this part? Because historically, this was a performance report that looked back on what we'd achieved in the past 12 months.
Largely, that's correct. Yes, we do like to look back on what's been delivered over the last 12 months. I think in terms of the planning side, we have a key responsibility to have forward plans in place, particularly around the sort of transportation area, but also in terms of economic planning. So I think this is intended to flag all that work that's going on, that's gone on, and those plans that will be coming forward. So we are trying to record that and paint a picture of what's coming through and what plans we have in place that are emerging. So you do have an overview of our planning situation, which is an important part of delivery. So we are trying to help sort of paint that picture right across the council's services so that you can take an overview of areas that you think are going well and ask questions about areas if you think, well, that doesn't look strong, we've not got a lot of information around this, that may reveal some further work that's required.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in the past, I've been critical of this because we say we're fighting for fairer funding. I've no problem with that as an approach. We may be making headway finally, I don't know. But we produce a report that says, hey, everything's fantastic, woohoo. So if I'm a minister, I'm going to go, well, you're doing all right on the money. Forget it. You're not going to get any more. This has changed the tone to some extent to be a bit more like, well, look, we could do more if we had more money. I'm not sure we've got completely there yet, but that's the thing. I think your presentation actually was a lot more integrated and forceful in that sense than the two separate bits of paper we've got here. One is a narrative and one's a lot of pictures, or a lot of data. You've actually brought it together quite nicely in a presentation. So if we could just sort of record you doing that and give that as a report, I think we'd be in a much better position. So that's my take on it. I agree with Simon about the narrative bit. It's a bit of a loving, really. The hard facts and figures, there are things in there you've highlighted about education and some aspects of adult social care where things should be better. And that's just where we are. I'm just going to, so my general point, I just want to be picky about one thing. Page 124, and this is purely parochial, I'll be quite honest about it. Leicestershire Market Towns Group having free Wi-Fi into lots of towns, not including Market Harbour, and I wonder why, because that's where I'm from, and therefore people would like to know that. Thank you, Chair.
So it's the old issue that if we produce two rows here a report that says everything in the garden's fine and we haven't got any problems, then how do we match that, on the other hand, with that we are facing serious financial situations worse than what we've currently experienced because we're so badly funded, and we've got to tell a true story. I mean, the one I would flag up was Help to Live at Home on 141, where you're given a perfectly factual assessment of what happened, but of course you don't go on to say that there were significant teething problems. One contractor pulled out, people missed their care on the day, didn't get it delivered. Sometimes I think we don't tell the full story and therefore miss the opportunity to actually underline how difficult the funding situation is.
Well, certainly in terms of the sort of the presentation, we will be writing a summary version of the report and making that available. So I'm hoping that point can be picked up in the summary. That if we need to be a lot kind of much more clear in terms of those messages, we'll certainly try and pick that up. I'm conscious we put a lot of information into these reports, so we are trying to make sure you, in terms of assurance purposes, you have all the information available to you, both statistically and narrative-wise. We can certainly think about that again moving forwards, whether by separating them out and looking at performance separately from delivery or taking them to different bodies. That will actually help with those messages. But I'm certainly keen where we are delivering, where we have got success stories and where we have good performance levels, which there are a lot of good stories that we should be making that clear to government that we are an area that does deliver. In a lot of areas there are a lot of strength in Leicestershire, but also clearly moving forwards. And this is sometimes where the backward-looking indicators and some of the delay on the indicators make it harder. So I think the messages around looking ahead in terms of where we may be in 2 or 3 years on the current funding situation, I think it will be a very different picture. So we're trying to flag those risks and issues, and this is where I really want to strengthen the metrics moving forward. So we have those forward-looking indicators and those critical control points so that we can flag those up in sort of lobbying to government.
Oh yes, could you help Dr. Hill with why Market Harbour's missing out on broadband?
That may be just an omission. We'll look into that and put that right. Yeah.
So it should be there. It's not. Well, it's not getting it.
I'll look into that and check whether that's just been omitted from the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could clarify that. Okay, I've got Louise now.
Thank you. One of the worst performances are the schools and academies, and I just wonder how much we can influence that now that more schools are going to academy status. We obviously can get the figures, but how much influence do we have on trying to up those figures?
I think we certainly have less influence on academies than we used to have through a variety of levers, the School Improvement Service, the advisory support that went into schools and a lot of monitoring that went in. I think the school improvement system is very different now. A lot of it is down to academies. It's more of a market situation with parents choosing where they go, which the theory is that would drive, by good information behind the system, people moving around, that would be a dynamic situation that would drive improvement. And we can see some of that in the system. But also the County Council does have a role to play in a reduced way through using the information, working with bodies like the Leicestershire Improvement Partnership for Education, using the data to help schools understand the issues, identify improvement partners, work with the trusts and the leader bodies within the education system. So it is a lesser role, and there are lesser levers available, but there are ways we can champion, shine a light on performance, say make sure schools are connecting to the right improvement areas. And ultimately there are some national approaches for weaker performing schools as well that are in the system. So very, very different and say much more limited, I think, options for yourselves. But I think championing, shining a light on that performance, challenging, asking for more information about what the school improvement system is doing, what school leaders are doing, how they're focusing is really important.
David, Bill.
On the point about performance, which Andy majored on, I think we'll all agree that the officers here are doing a very good job indeed with the resources being reduced. It's quite clearly that people are working hard and working well, and I think it'd be nice if we could actually record our thanks to them if we can. But could I refer to a more serious point on this report, and that is, which you mentioned, and that is the narrative, which I'd like to refer to page 122 onwards, 122 and 124. The problem about being on this county council these days is that we receive information through members' information services, we receive briefings, we listen to the leader when he tells us what's happening at full council meetings, but we don't actually get round to voting very much. And a picture is building up of a changing county, especially in the south and east of the county, which we're all now part of through the work of Midlands Engine and Midlands Growth and the Strategic Growth Plan and the Expressway. All these propositions are being worked up and worked on by officers, ready for consultation. But we sit here as ordinary members of the council and we just have to observe this. And I think this is the first time it's actually come before us in the form where we are invited to say anything, if in fact we are being invited to say anything this afternoon. Now, I have grave reservations about all the items on page 122, simply because I don't regard myself as an agent of the government saying that we must agree to growth at all costs, or an agent of anybody else. I'll listen to what the government has to tell me that this is needed, but I'll also listen to the people who gave me the honour of putting me here. And I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced that the people of South Leicestershire actually want to see the area covered in large sheds, because that is the prospect that we are being faced with. I know we're talking about something that's going to roll on into long after we've all gone, 2030 and onwards, but in the meantime, the plans that we have put together or have been put together in our name by Midlands Connect and all the rest of it are being acted on by developers. And from the south of the county rolling eastwards through, I don't know where it's going to stop, because I've seen plans of a massive DPD depot on the A5. I've seen plans of a massive rail freight depot at Sapcut. And I've heard this afternoon about further sheds to the east of that. So that what we're being asked to approve this afternoon is a complete change of the Magna Park. That seems to have a life of its own. Now, this might be all wonderful, and this might be what everybody wants in Peatling Parva and Sharnford and everywhere else that's going to be affected. But I've got no knowledge of that. Nobody from those areas has actually told me that I'm authorised to speak on their behalf and vote this through. And until that happens, I can't be a party to this. And I'd like I don't know how we can actually do it, Chairman, but I would like to be recorded as saying that until the people of South Leicestershire have actually told us what they want, I don't want to be a party to approving this. And the reason I say that is because what actually happens in practice is that we'll be told several months down the line is, oh, this came to you as a member of the Scrutiny Commission. You didn't say anything. You nodded it through. Well, I'm not prepared to nod it through. I'd just like my name to be recorded as saying that until the people actually have told us what they actually want to see, then I don't want to be a party to this document. The rest of it's fine. Performance, I think you're doing a wonderful job, Andy, and I think you articulated it well, and I think that message should go back. But this rolling forward into the future, before we've actually asked people what their views are, I think we should call a halt. But there we are.
Yeah, well, this is the problem of doing so much in partnership now with others. Where do you actually make a decision? Yeah, exactly. So what is the status, Andy, of the things in the narrative then, when we talk about things that actually haven't been consulted on? Or is this a commitment, or is it just a statement of fact?
Perhaps I can come in here. I think first thing I would say is that quite a few of what's covered on page 122 there has been to the Cabinet and to this Commission in their earlier configuration. So, and I'm not certain on this, but I think the strategic economic plan that the LEP produced a few years ago did come to the Scrutiny Commission and went to Cabinet. So we had an opportunity to comment on that, and that would be the intention with the revised strategic plan before it's finally agreed. We're not sure whether it will be a strategic plan or a local industrial strategy. We're waiting for the industrial strategy white paper to come out any moment on that. In relation to the strategic growth plan, it has been agreed here that each stage of that plan will come to the Scrutiny Commission before it goes to Cabinet, and we've brought to you the strategic growth statement previously, which was a fairly high-level document, and we will be bringing the draft strategic growth plan to you in February, and the final plan will come here too. So that will happen. And the enabling growth plan and infrastructure plans were both approved by Cabinet, and from recollection, they came to the Commission as well. So I think you have been cited on quite a few of these. The Midlands Engine is something that's emerged more recently, and is in a sense it's a bit of a top-down government initiative, which we're engaging with as effectively as we can. But that isn't something, I don't think, that's been to Cabinet or the Commission, but the Midlands Engine Vision for Growth was something that was issued. So the Midlands Engine Strategy was something that was issued by government, and the Midlands Engine Partnership has responded to that in terms of developing a more detailed vision for growth that supports that. So I think I would argue that these plans are being brought in front of you at the appropriate time, but it is a complicated picture, and I can understand why there's some concern about how this is moving forward.
I think I'd still like to find some way of recording my concern that we should not approve the narrative until we've heard.
This is going to Cabinet, this report. Does it go to Council? It does go to Council on the 6th of December, so it's going to Council, David. You better have your say there. Okay?
Can we record it here?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. If you wish to record a reservation about what we're signing up to at this stage. Okay, I've got Terry Einan.
Thank you, Chair. I think from what Mr. Bill said, I'm not alone in thinking, why on earth am I scrutinising this enormous and comprehensive document for which every paragraph could equally be a paper that we then wish to scrutinise. And I think that there was a point that you made, Mr. Galton, earlier about what are we going to do with all of this. I think looking through it, quite a lot of it will be necessarily scrutinised in other committees because it covers health, it covers ENT and adult social care. I think the section on the sort of economy is one that I think, it isn't entirely clear who gets to scrutinise this, and so much of it is going on beyond us and with other organisations. But as we saw with this morning's workshop, our role as commissioners, we can scrutinise anything that affects Leicestershire that we like. So if there's a paragraph in there that we want to scrutinise, presumably this is something that we can request for more detail on. And so I've got two things I think that this commission ought to look at. One comes out of that section, the economy, because I'm interested in the market towns, as I happen to represent one of them. That looks really interesting. I'd like to know that is money well spent, and would hope that at some point we can scrutinise this project. And then the other one is more homely, on page 121. Wellbeing and absence. I think that's an area that as a commission we should be interested in how we are dealing with this. It looks like whatever we've been doing isn't working because the number of absence management cases has increased. This doesn't sound good. So can we put that on our wish list for some scrutiny, Chair?
I'm advised that the latter one, in relation to staffing, comes under the Employment Committee and goes there. And I have seen they do have regular reports on sickness and absence.
Yes.
Yeah, as a member of that committee, I can confirm that.
Okay, thank you. But your other one on the market towns, in terms of what's that hoping to achieve and trying to get a handle and a measurement on what it's doing, I think that would be a good area for a report. I suggest we take that up through our work plan process. Is there anything you want to add to that, Tom?
No, just that be happy to bring a report on the market towns work that's being undertaken at the moment.
Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. Just a typo, first of all, on 203. You're adding percentages for children's and families. Just needs looking at there because it comes to 101%.
Inflation.
Yeah, instead of 100%, 63 and 38. Right, my other question would be, page 123 under economy. The 12 and the 13 projects that have been identified there under the EU structural and investment funds, are they in jeopardy? Are they reliant on what happens in the next 2 years of coming off? Thank you.
The government has committed to honouring European funding up in terms of these sorts of projects, I think it was up to 2019. I'd have to double check on the figures. So there is some protection for the funding that has been allocated through this, but beyond that date, then there is uncertainty about the future of this. The government is also talking about developing I think it's called a shared prosperity growth fund, which is intended to be a replacement for the European funding sources, but we've not seen any detail on that as yet.
Do we know whether local authorities will have an input into bidding or delivering those projects?
These projects that are listed here,
what currently is funded through EU structural and investment, will local authorities continue to have an input into this new fund?
Yes, that's our understanding, and certainly we do have the opportunity to bid into the current European funding through the local ESIF subcommittee that exists.
Yeah. Okay. Does that deal with your concern? Okay. Terry Richardson.
Just before I ask my question, just a bit, if we are minded to look at market towns at this committee, could I suggest we wait until after the NNDR pilot bid, because that does allow for additional funding for market towns within it to go through the districts if that is accepted. So that would be sensible to look at it at that time once the whole position was known as a thought. But
you mean as to whether we become a pilot?
If we become a pilot, there will be more funding available.
Okay.
As part of that pilot scheme. So it would just be sensible to do it at that time. My question really revolves around page, two quick questions. Page 133, Desford Crossroads. My understanding was that had been turned down for funding. Is it still on our intended list that we'd like to do something, but just not the scheme we applied for? I was only thinking this document's dated December, and my understanding was it was turned down in November.
My understanding on that is that there was a bid into a specific fund for Desford Crossroads improvements. That wasn't successful, but it retains on the list of projects where we will seek funding as and when opportunities arise.
That's brilliant. And the second one was on page 137, Highways Maintenance. Now, I certainly applaud the preventative maintenance, particularly in terms of potholes. What concerns me about preventative maintenance on the highways is if you go down any road in any of our divisions these days, you'll see weeds growing out of the gutter, on the road gutter and out the pavements. And it just strikes me that we need to consider the whole preventative maintenance, because those weeds will actually rip up the edge of the road where it meets the curb and cost us a fortune going forward if it's not done. Should you wish hundreds of photographs, I can send them to you. So I think it gives the impression we're doing...
I don't think Tom would want lots of photographs.
I think it just gives it...
He's not responsible for that
I think my point is it just gives the impression we're doing preventative maintenance on the highways. We are in one specific area with potholes. I'm concerned we're missing a larger problem.
This was asked. I can't remember where it was asked. And there is a contract in place for weed spraying, and you may have seen it. They go round on a quad bike with a lance and spray along the gutters. I think there were some problems, and they were behind, but it has to be done at certain times, otherwise it doesn't have the effect. But we were assured that it has not been cut. It's not an area that's received a reduction, so the service should be delivered. If you've got local problems, you probably best take them up direct with Highways Customer Services and ask them why they haven't done your patch. Perhaps they're doing it now.
Perhaps they're en route. Perhaps they're there as we speak.
Yeah. But there was a problem, but whether they've caught up with it, I don't know. Anything to add, Tom?
I don't know the answer to that, but we can obviously feed that comment back to Highways.
Yep, that was easy. Rosita.
Yes, in relation to Terry's, I followed them once, and they drive extremely fast as they're spraying, and the spray goes into the atmosphere rather than on the weeds. And the other point was taken up, also almost answered by Terry. It was in relation to market towns, and I think we need to do a scoping. But then I have got a general point. As Terry said, and that's Dr. Einen, every single chapter you could scrutinise in details, and unless you are a ward member or you were involved in that, you can actually, you can't see the overall picture. However, I like these snapshots because they're really, really good to go out to the community and for the community to actually see what we're doing, what we've done, and where we're going. And I tend to use it in my newsletters. However, I've also identified with Councillor Bill. I know that we are under constant pressure over our growth plans, our strategic economic plans, and we are elected. And when I'm saying it's government imposed, I've not seen it. The cabinet decided. Leaders are making these decisions. My residents say, but I have elected you. And then I tend to counteract and say, but the problem becomes when partnerships are involved and we are having to deliver it, we have no choice. And my residents say, but we have elected you to do something about it. And I see nodded all around. And I'm sitting here, like the rest of us, totally impotent over this growth plan, this strategic economic plan that has been enforced on us. And I'm also ever so uncomfortable. And the other thing is, it comes top down, and not only us as members, elected members are blamed, but our planning districts. Oh, well, you've got to approve this because... And I like to add on, I have got, for instance, 2,000 residents objecting to certain developments in my area. And all I ever get, it's a growth plan, it's economic prosperity. But who wants it? What's the point? And that is where the problem lies. And I just wanted to add that to Councillor Bill's point, because I think it's really, really valuable. And I've not got much of a choice, but I share his sentiment of being uncomfortable. So, but anyway, I like the plan. It's a great snapshot, and I think it is something, we all can buy into as forward-looking and to see where we need to improve, but in particular where we can blow our trumpet. And I think we should be positive and blowing our trumpet far more with all of the things we have done well.
Bit of a statement there, really.
Yes, it was. I was on my soapbox.
Just really, with the session coming up in February on the strategic growth plan, that's perhaps the time to cover those issues in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to. Yeah.
But
Right.
to take out, I'd just like to say, after I've
She
been on my
wanted to put her
soapbox,
concerns on the record.
yes, but I think we need to blow our trumpet as well after all of those concerns.
Right, I think we've taken a very good comprehensive view on this report. I haven't heard any, apart from Terry's suggestion of a report on market towns, I haven't heard any requests for any further. But please remember, you all are chairs of relevant overview and scrutiny committees. If this is an area that affects your committee that you think, going back and looking at this again, needs further scrutiny, then by all means ask for a report. Okay, can we note this?
On that point, if you want a specific concern, I learnt this morning that the southern gateway to the expressway, which was due to be allocated to Hinckley, is now creeping down the A5, and it seems now to come out at Claybrook Magna or Claybrook Parva or somewhere in that area, which means I assume that there will be the expressway will cut across country, and somewhere between Hinckley and Lutterworth, might even be Lutterworth, because I'm told it's only a vision and they can put this blob anywhere they like on the map, Highways England haven't been involved with any of it, so it's quite how they're going to respond is another complication.
Just to clarify, we're going to have the director of E&T come to that meeting as well as Tom's team. Okay.
But by that time, we'll be halfway through the consultation.
Well, our role in this is going to be, as a consultee, responding to the MAG. And we'll have to decide what else we want to do when we look at it from that point. It's so significant, maybe there ought to be a debating council at some point. But we can look at that. Okay, but as far as this report's concerned, I think we've gone into it in some detail. What I'd like to do now is just take a quick comfort break. We've still got 3 more. Sorry, Andy. It was
just wanted to mention one last point. All of the data for 2015-16 that feeds into this report will be available to members shortly on the members' intranet through a new interactive Tableau tool. And thanks to Alex Lee. Alex is our technical specialist who's done all the work on the 2015-16 data. He's created the tool which will be available to you, say, through the internet and in the members' Tableau server. And the 16-17 data, when that's available in January, we'll make sure that's available to you as well for those that want to sort of do more drilling down.
Can you make it easy so I can download this as an attachment to an email? Certainly.
Rosemary will email the link so that you can spend your evening going through all this data. Okay. Right, so we're going to close this. We're going to have a 5-minute comfort break, and then we're moving on to Fit for the Future, the Oracle report.
Biscuits? Where are the biscuits? That is the question. Is it a cutback? I would have thought, man, seniority such as yourself could overrule this cutback. You can't read that.
Biscuit?
Yeah.
We need biscuits, we need sugar.
It's been a heavy day.
We need a sugar rush. When you reach our age, you need any help you can get.
Sugar rush has arrived.
Very funny.
Does that come under your department, biscuits for members?
They come on with mine actually. Like it's up.
Can you afford it, Roger?
It can be arranged.
I think we need something. A sugar cube. We might just have a packet of sugar.
I'll drop some in on the way when I'm leaving if I can.
Significant and important piece of work that's being done is IT again, and we've got to get this right, otherwise we'll have problems for years. But reading the report, it looks like a very thorough process is going on. We've got Roderick Connor, Assistant Director in Resources. He's going to tell us a bit more about it.
Okay, Chair, thank you. I'll try and keep it brief because it is a brief report on work in progress. It has come to the Scrutiny Commission because it is a key decision. And the context of it is, as you mentioned, it's about the replacement of the Oracle e-business suite. So I'll take you through the report very quickly. The purpose of the report is actually to explain the overall programme of e-business suite, to outline the approach to procurement, which I think is important, and also to advise members of the intention to deliver this change as a transformation programme and not just as a system implementation. So I would actually say that it is IT, but it's IT and more, and I'll pick that up in the report. A report will go to Cabinet in January, where we'll actually ask them to approve the purchasing of new software and actually endorse the programme as an opportunity to deliver real transformation rather than just a business implementation, and approve an outline business case which will be ready by December for submission to Cabinet in January. We'll also be asking Cabinet to delegate the award of the system implementer and the approval of the full business case to officers. If I can just provide a quick outline of background, the Oracle e-business suite is the software that the County Council uses to provide HR, payroll, procurement and finance. We've actually had it within the County Council since 1992, but most significantly we now share the instance with Nottingham City Council, which is also supported by the Shared Service Centre. There are two critical dates which are coming up very soon, two key milestones. The actual Oracle support for the version that we're on actually ends in December 2021. And even more significantly, this instance is currently hosted externally by Velocity Technologies, and the contract date for the hosting arrangements ends in March 19 with an option to extend to March 2020. That means actually that the whole process and planning around it have got some deadlines because we really need to deliver the implementation while it's still in support. I think what I would like to draw out significantly from the report is that actually we're not keen to maintain the status quo. Although the system actually works, the current software has a large amount of customizations, which is just something that organizations tend to do over time, but it makes it quite difficult and expensive to support it. Not all of the functionality is being fully utilized. So the existing system has a lot of functionality that the business isn't using. There are a lot of workarounds in place and spreadsheets, variation in working practices, and these also compromise reporting and the opportunity to improve performance. We could actually do just a technical upgrade, which would mean we'd keep the system and just upgrade it to the next version. But we have discounted that and gone into procurement with a choice of either re-implementing. The difference between a re-implementation and a technical upgrade is that a re-implementation means you take the system back to scratch, you go back to a blank page, and you do all the business change, review all your business processes at the same time. And we're keeping that as an open option, whilst also going out to procurement for potentially an alternative application solution, which could also be Oracle Fusion or could be one of the other vendors in the marketplace. There is governance in place. A programme board has been set up, which is chaired by both the Director of Corporate Resources, Brian Roberts, and the Director of Resources in Nottingham City, Candida Brudenell. We also we also carried out a small procurement to bring in Capgemini. Capgemini, as I'm sure you know, are a global brand who have a lot of experience around implementations. And we've actually brought them in to advise us on our approach to carrying out this large piece of work. It's probably worthwhile just drawing on the fact that we are in partnership with Nottingham City, because I think the replacement of the Oracle software gave us an opportunity and raised some questions. Should we actually continue in partnership? And it also raised the question, would we actually procure the solution together? I think the board has actually endorsed the fact that members on both sides are happy with the partnership. The shared service centre does deliver savings on an annual basis. So the intention was that we would carry that on together. Capgemini were commissioned with two specific pieces of work. One was an options appraisal, which was delivered in October, and the other one is the outline business case that they will present in December. I'd like to draw out the three key things that were in the options appraisal. The first one actually I have covered, which was the decision, would we just do a system implementation and upgrade, or would we view it as more transformational and go out? The second one, which is quite a complex one, was actually, do we decide to host, or do we move in accordance with the government's direction towards a cloud, or what's called SaaS, Software as a Service solution? And the third option that we had was, did we follow a traditional path, which is that we go out and procure software and implementation partner together, which is generally what people do, or did we split the procurement? Well, I think I've covered off point number one, but we actually went against the recommendation of Capgemini, which was in the procurement to go for a SaaS or cloud solution. So we could have narrowed that procurement down and made life a bit easier for us. The board was actually concerned to keep all options open, because although SaaS or cloud, which is external hosting really, means that that's the direction of travel, the costs aren't completely transparent at this moment in time. So we wanted to go into the procurement with all options open. However, the recommendation that we did follow was we've split the software procurement from the implementation partner. So we're currently out and have received back submissions to replace the software. And I think one of the biggest benefits in that is that it will mean, A, that we'll have much clearer costs to fill into the business case, the outline business case. But it also means that once we have appointed a vendor of the software, we can enter into conversations with them and help us shape the procurement for the implementation partner. I think the only other things that I would like to draw out is just that emphasis on the fact that we want to do this as a transformation program. There were lessons learnt from previous implementations, and we actually want to draw on them. One of the most critical ones is that we don't customize the solution, that we don't make huge amounts of customization, that we actually try and take it out of the box and apply it in accordance with best practice. And I think the other thing to draw out is that the current program governance will ensure that future investment will actually make a significant return. We have not worked out the detail yet on the financial costs because the outline business case is work in progress. But I think three key points that I'd draw to your attention. We've got indicative costs around the implementation of 10 million, which of course would be shared with Nottingham City, and that would refer to the costs of an implementation partner and also implementation costs from staff within. I think we're very keen to make sure the current costs are 2.2 million of Oracle that's hosted, 2.2 million shared across both organisations. Our aspiration is that at a minimum the new solution costs the same, but we actually believe will cost less. And although this is a huge investment for the County Council, I think we're really keen to make sure that that transformation leads to business improvements and performance, and that we do get a return on our investment.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive introduction. You said about the cost. Presumably, that we have to pay that in one go, or do we pay it over? I mean, is there then presumably licenses, and is there a support element, a support package?
It would be paid annually, annual costs.
So that 10 million is an element of that must be a one-off, as you've described.
Yes.
And then we have to keep paying an annual amount, do we, on top of that? That's in addition to the 10 million, is it?
That's in addition to the 10 million. The 10 million would actually be for the cost of the implementation partner and internal costs, but that would be 5 million per organisation, and that's a high level. But we think that's the ceiling of the costs.
And then there'll be an ongoing cost, particularly, presumably, if it's hosted in some cloud somewhere.
There will be. Yeah. There'll be an ongoing cost. I think it's worth drawing out the fact that the current cost of 2.2 million, which is for the Oracle licenses and the hosting. The hosting contract with Velocity Technologies is 800,000 a year. When we entered into that, which was quite a long time ago, I think about 2010, 2011, it was a very different world. So I actually think the costs associated, and certainly the indicative costs that have come back through the procurement software, we believe it'll be considerably less than that.
Okay. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now going to sound like the donkey from Animal Farm, who I'd learned today was called Benjamin. I can remember back in 2012 sitting as an observer on the Transformation Board, led by the then leader, and where this was all agreed. And I did seem to remember thinking, we've got a lot of money to invest, and over the lifetime of it, which may have been 5 years, I suspect it may have been longer, but that's technology for you, we're just about going to see our money back. And we were advised at that time by some accountants, I think. Now, I actually think this strikes me as a much more robust solution than that did. I've never personally been happy with tiny self into somebody like Oracle with massive licensing fees and I think what's happening here with Capgemini, I'm really sort of much happier with this than what we signed up to then. I seem to remember I think the numbers are smaller this time, but I can't recall because it's 5 years ago and I've been to bed since then. So what you're saying sort of pleases me more so than what happened last time, which again was touted as a transformation project, but we'll just draw a polite veil over that, Chair.
Right, I don't think there's a response needed to that.
Apart from thank you.
We learn hopefully from past experience. Yeah. Any questions from members about this project? Obviously, it's a very, very important project because if we have to have this system, because we had a problem a while back, didn't we, with paying invoices, and that it was related to this, wasn't it? And we had to go back to a paper-based system. And people were getting upset because they weren't getting their money, and staff had to work incredibly hard over weekends and goodness knows what, didn't we? So we don't want a repeat of anything. We want this to work first time and every time.
No, I think it's very important that it does work, and I think the Director of Finance is actually involved in the governance, and it is very keen to make sure that the implementation is quality assured.
Sorry, Rosita.
Thank you. Now, it sounds really, really wonderful. Relationship with Nottingham is great. Governance is great. Cost shared, and we're recuperating this. So I'll just ask, what risks are there? Because, it sounds too good. Are there any risks, Broderick? Will it improve the performance? And what can possibly go wrong, if anything at all? Because I asked that once before, and it was all wonderful. Nothing could go wrong, and the system then sort of went went all haywire. So are there any downturns? Is there anything we look out for? What is your opinion on the risk?
Huge risks. this here will always carry huge amounts of risk. You're up against time scales. It's about making sure that you're aligning resources together with the implementation partner. It's actually about making sure that you're clear from the onset what are the outcomes that you want to get. So, in all honesty, that is the answer. There are huge risks associated with it. I think what we're trying to do is we are trying to make sure that we do learn, both organisations, lessons from the past. I think it's helpful to have in a partner such as Capgemini advising us, and they'll be independent of any other implementation partner. And I think the governance around it does need to be robust. But if you just take the payroll implementation itself, we pay thousands of people across both organisations, and it needs to be done properly. So I won't pretend there aren't risks around it, Rosita, but I do think that there is sufficient governance, and we will continue to have governance in it to make sure that it's delivered effectively.
If I may come back, Chairman. So you are saying that you're fully well aware of the risk and you're managing them, and you're quite clear that it will improve performance and add value. Just one more question. How long do you think how long will the system last? I mean, how long until we have payback, that kind of aspect, if you can elaborate.
Yes, of course. We went out to the procurement for 5 years, but we've actually put in it the ability to extend that for 15, working on the basis that if it's implemented properly and we're happy with it, we would want to extend it. We will develop the business case with based upon a return over 7 years.
And the 1.6 million we're saving annually, will that be maintained, go up, go down?
I would like to think it would be improved, because I think there are a number of workarounds in the current system, and we haven't fully maximised the functionality. So I think with improvements to business, we should also be able to reduce manual inputting and keying, and therefore take out headcount numbers.
Thank you very much.
Terry.
Just one very quick one. Most large organisations have outsourced payroll, etc. Why are we not?
One of the things might be relating to what Rosita has actually said, which is that the risk of doing that. I think one of the differences in a public sector payroll compared to a lot of private sector ones is what we call multiple employments. And we have many people who do different jobs, and a number of different jobs. And a lot of payrolls actually struggle with that. One of the key criteria that we will use in our selection is that the systems have the ability to pay multiple employments. I think the other thing is that at the moment, outsourcing is not as an attractive a proposition as it used to be, because the margins on it are very tight. But we think we've got the ability to do it in-house. And I think the final thing I would add to that is that the Shared Service Centre also does payrolls on behalf of schools, academies and other external partners, and the County Council uses that as an income stream. We wouldn't want to give that up.
A lot of academies, when they left the authority, they said, that we can make savings on that, and off they went to some private organisation like that, and it went pear-shaped, and they've come back. That's right, isn't it? Yes. A lot of them have come back, because when you're talking about teachers' pensions deductions and all that sort of thing, and pension, it's very, very specialist. Some private small organisation doesn't have that expertise, and people weren't getting paid. Their deductions, their pensions weren't being done properly, and the academy's got the governors of the academy's got a lot of stick about it, and they've come back here. They've chosen. They don't have to. They're independent schools now. Organisations do what they want, but the service they get from here, as far as the feedback I've had, is very good.
That wasn't behind the question. I just wanted to check we considered it. That was all. I mean, what schools and academies do is entirely up to them. I mean, if they're paying us for a service, great. I mean, that was just a clarification I wanted, which I didn't sense fully from the report.
Any other questions? No. Right. Well, we're happy with this, but we would like to know the outcome. Okay.
Hopefully, it will be me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roderick.
Thank you.
Right, moving on quickly. Item 12, joined by Director of Finance, Chris Tambini, Jason Firth, Chief Accountant, or looks after the budgets, and this is period 6 monitoring of the medium-term financial strategy. Chris, do you want to do an introduction?
If it's okay, I'm not sure what you want, but I'll do quite a short introduction. Is that yeah? Because I know last time we had quite a long discussion on this report. So just by way of introduction, this is the period 6, so halfway through the year in terms of the initial monitoring report. So you can agree with it with a certain degree of certainty, unlike the previous period 4 one you had. The first page just sets out some of the kind of previous decisions. Again, that's been reported through to this commission previously. So moving on to page 238. I think the key issues around this year's budget monitoring are around children and family services. So although overall we're looking at just over a bit over a £5 million underspend, which is good, the issues are within children and family services. So just looking at DSG to start with, we're looking at an overspend of £1 million. That doesn't sound very much, but you need to remember that we did allocate £3 million worth of growth into that area for this current year. The budget is £63 million. So despite the £3 million extra growth, we're overspending. And last year we overspent by £2 million. I would say that I think the department are doing a good job in terms of coming up with mitigating actions, but the demographics are kind of, I suppose, against this area in terms of increasing numbers of children with special education needs. So I think we're doing a good job, but it's going to be an area of pressure that the authorities are going to be facing, I think, for the short term and the medium term. Moving on to the local authority budget in terms of children's, although the overspend has actually decreased by a bit over £1 million to just under £4 million, again, there's acute pressure in that area. So the two elements of pressure, one around the number of placements that's going up, and the other one is around kind of the staffing budget, so the investment we've had to put in as a result of the Ofsted action plan. Again, I think the key issue for the authority, particularly around numbers of placements, is this is a national issue, and the number of placements is going up nationally. And again, I can see this being an acute area of pressure that we're going to be faced by the council over the next kind of 4 or 5 years. And I think we'll be putting some extra growth into this area next year over and above what we'd already factored into the MTFS. So again, an issue where the department have put mitigating steps in there, but I've still seen, despite those mitigating steps, there will be continuing pressure. In terms of better news, adults and communities is underspending by a bit under £4 million. The reasons are kind of set out in the report and relate to things like extra income, reduction in direct payments and lower residential and nursing care that's in the budget. But I suppose by way of context, although we're underspending, I think the Commission needs to remember that we did allocate nearly £66 million worth of growth into the area. So we're underspending despite that growth. And also there's been considerable resources gone into the area in terms of Better Care Fund and the Improved Better Care Fund. So despite those extra resources, we're still spending more than we spent last year. I wasn't going to dwell on the rest of the kind of revenue budget. I think the key change over and above what I reported previously was we've taken the opportunity to release £3 million from the inflation contingency. The inflation pressures are less we anticipated than when we set the budget. Things like the national living wage haven't gone up as much as we anticipated. The final thing before I move on to capital is just on business rates. The pool continues to perform well with a surplus of nearly £6 million forecast. And just to let the Commission know that we did put a pilot bid in for a pool for the 100% retention of business rates. That's gone in. I think it's a good bid. We'll find out probably kind of early mid-December whether that's been successful. And if it is successful, that could bring in the best part of £20 million into Leicester and Leicestershire. And there's a kind of proposal in terms of how that would be spent. In terms of the capital programme, I wasn't going to say anything actually. I think there's a lot of detail in terms of the ups and downs that are kind of set out in the report, but if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them.
Right, so on the business rates, thing, you mentioned that there's a proposal as to how that would be spent, and I have seen some figures on that. Can you, when you bring us the MTFS, can you sort of flesh that out a bit? Because presumably there are some options, and at the moment it all goes to the LEP, doesn't it, under the present arrangement of the 50%. I think we've said before, if we've got dire financial situations, we ought to be making the case to retain some of that to help our services. So is that a decision, if we get into this pilot, and I know it's a big if we get chosen, then all this will have to be firmed up and agreed with it? What's the timescale for that? And will there be some decisions to be taken around that with other partners and the districts and so on?
The bid has obviously been structured around the criteria that they're going to use to select the successful ones. So in terms of the bid, from memory, I think it's £19 million extra we get. Is the way that's been divvied up is that there will be £6 million that will go into kind of public realm improvements in both the districts and the city. So there'll be £6 million for that. There's £7 million that will be around kind of infrastructure. So that'll kind of in infrastructure to unlock housing growth. So principally it'll be kind of transport infrastructure. Then we're going to put some money into some of the, I suppose, the real budget pressures faced by all the authorities. I mean, I've talked about children's social care here. The City Council have equally got a problem with children's social care. So again, we're going to put some money into there. And then there's just a small balance that will be kind of divvied up across the 10 authorities. So a bit will go to fire as well. So as part of the bid process, we have identified where the money will be going.
Okay, it's good to hear that some money will come in to help support services. The only other one I wanted to pick up on is the adults and communities. You could see the pressures coming off there, but you're flagging up at 25 that home care is forecast to overspend. Now, when the new contract came in, quite a lot of people opted for direct payments. But now, have you pinned down what this is due to? Is it new clients, or are people coming back to the service that had previously not signed up or took a direct payment and perhaps it's not worked out for them?
I mean, it is increased numbers of new clients. I mean, I can't really comment on whether there's been a movement between the two. I know when Help to Look at Home first came in, there was a big switch to direct payments. And in some respects, you kind of need to look at home care and direct payments together to see the overall impact in terms of demand. And there is an underspend on direct payments.
But if there's new demand, in other words, if more people are being assessed as being in need of home care, then that's a worrying trend, isn't it? That it could continue. They've got 0.5 million there. If that keeps rising,
it is a worrying trend. But I always find with these things, you kind of need to look at the whole in and around, because if that means there's less people going into the residential, you can't, and there are reduced costs on residential. That's a good thing because you're keeping people in their home, kind of, more than they're going into residential. So you kind of need to look at it in the round. And I suppose in the round, compared to where we started the year with the budget is underspending. So overall, we're managing demand successfully.
That's the bottom line, isn't it? The whole department. Right. Any other questions about this monitoring report and the current financial situation, Terry?
Yeah, sort of follow on in the same area on adult social care. I'm a little bit worried that our underspend might end up being a false economy, because we've got residential and nursing care, reduction in the number of service users, low average care package costs. That there's certainly nationally there's been concerns about instability in the home care market because there's just not, they're just not getting enough money to do the job, and we are being threatened by Simon Stevens with having our Better Care Fund removed. And I know I've certainly said this in Health Scrutiny on many occasions when I was on that committee, that it's not enough to be saying that we're looking after those for whom we are statutorily responsible, for which we've always managed to engineer very good figures, but we're pretty rubbish when it comes to getting people out of hospital per se. So if the worst comes to the worst and Simon Stevens takes his ball home, how is that going to affect us financially?
It's a good question. If you look at our delayed transfers of care performance, actually it's pretty good compared to most other council two-tier areas. It actually is pretty good. But the risk is, if you look at the total amount of money that comes in terms of improved better care fund, you're getting on for £50 million. In terms of what the penalty will be, it's difficult to say because they're not being particularly specific. But given the figure that we're getting is so large, the penalty could be quite large. And it is a concern, particularly when we get into next year, because I think it will be unlikely they could retrospectively take away money they've given us this year. But in terms of future years, it is a real worry. And I know it is a worry for a lot of authorities. I mean, if you look at the latest figures, I can't remember the proportion, but quite a large number of authorities, I think 40 or 50, their DTOC performance has actually got worse over recent months. Ours hasn't. So I don't think we're at the top of the order in terms of when the Department of Health are going to be looking at sort of where they're going to be taking away money. So, but it is a risk, and it is a key risk for the authority.
Okay, Sarah Hill.
Thank you. At Health Scrutiny earlier in the week, we were led to believe that 22 million was at risk, probably, because that's the bit that the CCGs get, and the way it was explained to us was that they'd say to that money, right, don't give it to the council, you spend it to deal with the problem. But the problem is in the hospitals, not with us. When there's a smaller bit, about 9 million, that we get for our bit, and we're unlikely to lose that because we've actually achieved our figures. That was the way it was explained to us. So exactly what will happen, who knows, you're right. I was going to ask, though, how much are we spending on agency staff for children's social workers? Because is that how much that is? Is that an issue at the moment? Because I know it is in all authorities.
I'll have to provide the figure to you separately, but we are spending a kind of a reasonable amount on agency staff. Again, it's part of a national issue. I mean, I know some authorities, such as Northampton, are spending a considerable amount. We're not in that kind of league, but increasingly it is hard to recruit staff, so yeah, it is an issue for us.
Any other questions? Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just something to help a new person like what I is. And on most of these that say there's an underspend or an overspend, I've got no idea what the budget is. So an underspend of £500,000 means nothing to me because I don't know what the overall budget is. And I wondered whether there was a mechanism that you could put... Am I not looking in the right place? If I
it is coming to you.
Oh.
It is coming to you in spades in the next few months as part of the medium-term budget. And what you'll get is the absolute breakdown of what the whole budget is for each area, right down to the individual. And at the end, when you go to the February council meeting, you will get it all in a book, and that could be your Bible. Bedtime reading for the rest of the year, because you'll be able to match that against all these items. I think it could be a bit more transparent sometimes, because they all have numbers, don't they, Chris? Maybe you could, in the future, to make it easier for members to trace back, would it be possible? Would it be easy, without causing you a lot of work, to put the budget number that you're referring to as to where that when you do these monitoring reports? Would that be difficult?
We could have a think about it, because the numbering actually relates to the savings rather than to the budget. What I will point out is a bit buried in the appendix, but if you go to Appendix 2 and you look in the right-hand corner, we do include the percentage reductions, but I accept it is slightly buried in the back of it. So, but we don't generally repeat that in the body of the report.
Okay.
So
I'll have to make sure.
Right, Rosita.
I have just got just a little one, Chris. Page 245, we're talking about capital future development. Lutterworth East is down for 4.5 million, which I can understand because there was land purchase and it is a heck of an area to develop with consultation reports and whatever. Now, on the next page, 246, it quotes Leader Farm, Lutterworth. Now, that is a tiny little blot on the site of a bypass where there are supposed to be a few industrial units and offices put. Now, that is going to cost us, allegedly, 6 million. And then if we're going back to 261, it says acceleration of the programme to fund agreed projects, another 2.662. Now, have you got any idea why there is so much money allocated to Leaders Farm? If you see what I'm trying to say here, it's just a tiny little thing. It's got outline planning permission, and all it takes is to submit it for a full application, which isn't going to cost, that sort of money. And I was wondering if you've got any idea, or whether there's more to it than meets the eye, or where do I find the explanation? Because it's been bugging me ever since I read it last time and I asked the question and I still haven't got an answer.
I'll do my best. in terms of Leaders Farm, you're right, it's a small kind of, I suppose, industrial estate we're developing. There's with a few sheds. Is the 6 million that's related to this report is some work we're doing with a company, Interseed. I think you're familiar with them, where we're looking at building a headquarters for them, and that £6 million relates to that cost. We will then release that to them and receive rental income from them.
So what you're saying is we are actually going to be the developer. So this is a new thing the county council is taking on, becoming a developer. So how is that? Where's the governance on that? Because
on that.
I can't remember where is it.
We had a report on that.
Oh, okay, right.
On this new role. This is all about trying to, in the end, generate additional income to help us get through our financial crisis.
Right, I missed that one then. Sorry about that.
Yeah. We're going into this quite big.
Yes. Right, I have to find me the report then again. Thank you.
I'm sure Rosemary better help you find it.
Yeah, sent me a link, thanks. Thank you.
Right, are you done?
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions on this report? We do get this on a regular basis. How many more are there to come, Chris, on this?
I think there's one more than the outturn. So
One more than the outturn.
You've got 2 more on this year.
Okay, Thank you very much. Right, so that's that report done. I haven't picked up any, obviously aware of the trends and the concerns, but we haven't picked up anything we weren't really aware of. So the final report this afternoon then is an annual report that we have on the earmarked funds and balances and reserves. And again, Chris, if you'd like to do an introduction.
Jason's actually going to take you through the detail of the report. But just before he kicks off, obviously we do this every year. We do kind of a thorough review of our reserves and balances each year. This year, for a whole host of circumstances which Jason can take you through, we have shifted quite a lot of money. You can kind of see it in the appendix. And one of the reasons for that is that we do have some acute pressure, particularly around our capital financing, in terms of the number and the size of some of the projects that are coming through. So just to say that we have moved more money around than we have done previously. We've always moved some money around, but this year we've moved a bit more.
Thank you, Chris. I think I may have the short straw here. Item 13 and the last item. No, thank you. I'll try and keep this brief. So, just to pick up what Chris just said. So this follows a detailed review of the earmarked funds that the authority holds. It excludes capital funds and capital receipts and grants. They're looked at as part of the compilation of the MTFS, and that'll be coming to various scrutiny and cabinet meetings in December and January. So paragraph 4 on page 265 is the main work that we did at this exercise. So we reviewed if the funds were required and at what level. We looked at the spending profile, so you'll see in one of the appendices that we give a forecast over the next 4 financial years. We've also looked at the uncommitted general fund. So in addition to earmarked funds, we have the uncommitted fund. And as Chris just said, we looked at options to consolidate or transfer balances to the capital reserves. So we've got 2 capital reserves. One's for schemes that are in the approved capital programme, we call that the capital financing reserve, and those that are yet to be allocated held within the future developments reserve. So turning to paragraph 5, we remind you of the policy the authority has around holding reserves. That's in Appendix A. Paragraph 6 gives a summary and links into the work and the update provided in Appendix B. So what we found as part of this review, that we're actually able to release, as we've put there, 16.1 million towards capital future developments and 1.2 towards approved capital schemes. So effectively, these were funding already approved schemes. We've just moved it into the capital funds rather than departmental reserves. So the transfers we made, the biggest, well, 2 of the bigger ones I'll talk about, insurance, we're able to take a review of those levels and release 3.9 million. So there was a fund audit undertaken on the level of public and employers' liability insurance that we hold, and based on that review, the reserve was overstated, and based on experience we've had since then, we believe we can safely release 3.9 million of that balance. We do contribute to that reserve annually, so we'll continue to keep that under review. We're also able to release 2.2 million from the uninsured losses reserve. So this, you may be aware, we hold for particularly municipal mutual insurance who went into liquidation some years ago. So we're still paying out, or they have assets, but we have to fund a share of those claims that come up. But their assets are improving, so the liability that we think we might have against that company, we've got a little bit more confidence about. So we've reduced, or we feel that we can reduce that reserve to 5 million. Paragraph 9, we've looked at the A&C developments reserve, and we're able to release 6.5 million from that reserve. So these were plans that they've got for future capital schemes, not yet developed, but what we're able to do is centralise that into the one fund from which they'll be able to put schemes forward. So rather than holding it in departments, it's all held in one place. Paragraph 10, we talked about extra care, 0.6 million, similar concept there. Money originally earmarked for that purpose, but at the moment there's no detailed schemes being identified, so we've moved that into future developments as well. So that's the total for that we've released, 16.1 million. And a little bit of an update on the future capital developments follows on paragraphs 13 through to paragraph 18. So probably the big numbers there is we've got on paragraph 15 a shortfall of 13.8 million at the moment. We've got 36 million funding. We think the schemes that we need to fund total 50 million, so we've got a shortfall. In addition to that, the asset investment fund has this notional target of growing to 200 million. If we did do that, that would require a further 80 million. We talk about how we could fund that and close the gap in paragraph 17, and in paragraph 18, it's quite complicated, the future developments. Things are moving all the time. There's new things coming into the programme, and there's new assumptions being made about what funding we may have in the future. So there'll be a detailed update in the MTFS that will be coming in December and January. So then over the next few paragraphs, we take you through a detailed review of every reserve that we hold. So there's a few words on every reserve there. So I won't take you through all of those, but perhaps if I just jump to the larger ones, insurance on paragraph 24. So despite taking money out of the reserve, we still hold 9.9 million. That's our forecast at the end of this financial year. The uninsured loss on uninsured loss fund of 5 million is our forecast at the end of the year. I mentioned that already. Paragraph 28, the Children and Family Services Department, we've not been able to complete a thorough review of their reserves. they're going through a period of transition with the recent Ofsted review and the current overspend that was mentioned in the Period 6 report. So they're undertaking that further review at the moment, and we hope to be able to complete that in December and bring that through in the next update of the earmarked funds that will come as part of the MTFS. Moving to the paragraph 37, the next significant reserve, commuted sums, 2.5 million is the forecast to be held at the end of this financial year. There's an explanation there about how that fund has evolved and how it's used. I don't think there's much more to say about that one. Paragraph 42 is the lithium project module that we maintain. The authority built that module, and we charge other authorities for using that. It's mainly Leicester City Council, and money that we generate from that we held in that reserve to fund future improvements. Moving forward, paragraph 51 talks about the transformation fund. So we hold a significant reserve primarily for project investment in project one-off investments to support the transformation programme, but also severance for staff exit costs. So they can be redundancy and capitalised costs. And just give you an idea, the last few years, because of the savings efficiency targets, the average has been around £3 million per annum on severance. Paragraph 54 is broadband. We've got 3.5 million left in the reserve, and that's earmarked for phase 3 of the project. So phase 2's coming to completion soon, and there's plans then to move it into phase 3, and that funding's been earmarked for that project. Paragraph 57 is it's a bit of a funny, really, in technical terms. We lent some money against the balance of reserves held to fund the local authority mortgage scheme. So you'll see a minus figure, but in effect we've lent it against across all of them. In practice, accounting terms, we've actually moved it out of the insurance reserve. But that money is coming up now for maturity, and we will receive 5.4 million this year, with the balance of 3 million coming back next year. So that money's been used for a better purpose than what is just sitting there on our balance sheet to support insurance. So we've been able to support first-time buyers of property. Paragraph 58 is a similar concept, really, but this time we've lent 20 million to invest in pooled property funds. So this is a way of getting a better return on our assets. So cash balances, the authority has significant balances, and we're able to earn a better return by investing in that particular model. There's a balance of 5 million that we've not yet committed on that, and we're just waiting for the market to be the right time for that. Paragraph 59, the capital financing reserve, 19.3 million. So that's the balance held to fund the approved programme, so the current approved capital programme. That's where that funding will be drawn upon. And paragraph 60, the other significant reserve, we've talked about the Future Developments Fund, so that's where that balance is held. The timing of that depends on the timing of the projects, so it's not directly comparable to the 36 million I mentioned earlier. We then move into schools and partnerships, so we also hold on our balance sheet funds on behalf of other partners, so we separate those in the analysis that we're shown in Appendix B and C. The biggest one is DSG, and we obviously can't touch that. That's held ring fence for schools by legislation. We have some health and social care money that we spend in accordance or in agreement with partners in the NHS. It's 0.9 of a million, so not significant numbers. Moving through the report, paragraph 70 talks about schools' earmark balances. So these are the balances schools hold themselves, so we delegate funding to schools, but it all sits on the authority's balance sheet. And the actual balance at the end of last financial year was 9.7 million. The other fund we hold that's not shown in the appendix then is the general county fund. So this is the rainy day fund. So not earmarked for any particular purpose, but is there for unexpected risks. And it's forecast to stay at the same level as it was last year, so 14.8 million. And that's in line with our reserves policy to hold it between 4 and 5% of the annual revenue budget. We do a risk assessment every year, and that's covered in paragraph 73. And in paragraph 75, we recently had our external auditors review as part of the external audit of the accounts, and they concluded that the reserve levels are reasonable for the, or appropriate, I've written there, that's the quote, for the size of this organisation. Paragraph 76 just reminds the committee of the updates that we report on reserves, so there are 4 updates there. And then just to conclude the balances at the end of this year, we estimate to be around 34.5 million for revenue purposes and just short of 70 million for capital.
Okay. Comprehensive introduction there. Any members got any questions about the balances and earmarked reserves? This is something we have annually, so we can keep an eye on it and scrutinise it. Terry?
Not a big one in the grand scheme of things. It's an excellent report and very detailed, but I was on Appendix C, the Leicestershire Schools Music Service seems to go from 160,000 down to nothing, and I couldn't see anything anywhere that explained what happens to that. Why?
Yes, sorry, I'm okay too. If I just refer you to Appendix B on the page before, we've actually, the service is moved between departments. It's moved from children's service to corporate resources. So what you can see in the columns is 160 come out of, yeah, hopefully you can see that on the right hand side.
That because it's part of the traded services?
I think it would be, yeah, part of LTS,
within
the
corporate resources.
traded services.
Yeah, okay.
When it on Appendix C, it's in corporate resources, and that 160 is not forecast going forward. So what happens to it?
We'd have to get back to you, but obviously the service think they're going to spend it on something. In terms of what that is, I'm not sure, to be honest, but we can try and find out for you.
Rosita?
Very quick one. Again, just one of the, which is a mortgage scheme, 57, off the top of your head, was that successful? How many takers did we get? And question number 2, the risk we have got under point 73, and I think one of the imminent risks which could be facing us is funding the additional cost of the living wage and the public sector pay, and well, they're all risk, but those are imminent. So say if they were to be hitting us in the immediate future, how would we be coping with that?
In terms of our MTFS, we have factored in an element for the national living wage. So it is factored into our 4-year plan. And when we refresh it over the kind of winter, we will refresh it in terms of current expectations. In fact, I kind of think that the pressure will come down a little bit. I think we'll eventually end up towards a £10 kind of figure, but it might take an extra year. So that is factored into the plans.
Because that would have been an imminent threat that, you know, but how about the mortgage scheme? How popular has it been? Any idea?
Yeah, I mean, the mortgage, again, you're testing my memory a bit because it goes back to 2012. I think we granted in the order of 200 mortgages. I think it's in that order. And I periodically check about how many actually have turned into bad debts or trouble repaying. And actually, I think there was one at one point, but I think even that has not been a particular issue. So it's been a great success. in terms of, I suppose, allowing people to access the housing market back in 2012 and 13. And actually, for us, we've had a return of around 3% on it. If we'd have stuck it in kind of overnight deposit, we'd have got about 2.25. So it's been kind of good all round, to be honest. And I actually think we would have continued the scheme if the government hadn't adopted their national scheme.
As Dr. Einan said earlier on, behind every little paragraph is a whole story in itself. And, I think it really is interesting, very informative. But, again, I don't think and I said this earlier, we don't blow our trumpet enough. There we've teased out a real success story where we helped 200 people to buy their house, and we gained in the bargain. And, there are other little success stories. And I think, mitigating risk. We should really think of blowing our trumpet just that little bit more to highlight the fact that we are, with very low money, still performing extremely well and delivering well. Blow your trumpet, Chris.
Right. Okay. So, if there's no other comments, I'm going to thank the officers for bringing that report. It's good and useful information. That completes all our items today. Can I remind you that our next meeting is on the 24th of January. It's also likely to be a fairly busy one because that is when we consider the medium-term financial strategy. In other words, next year's budget and the strategy for the next 4 years. And we'll have an array of cabinet members coming because they are ultimately responsible for each budget. And also, can I remind you then that we're having an additional meeting at 2 o'clock on the 7th of February, single item strategic growth plan. Thank you very much. Close the meeting.
Get on with that.